Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 15th meeting of the Richmond Selectboard. Unfortunately, a lot has happened since I sat in this chair 2 weeks ago. In light of that, we have a lot of things to talk about tonight. I just want to put a couple reminders out. We've been running way over time the last few meetings. So I want to remind everybody to wait to be recognized before you speak, and also we need to limit comment to 3 minutes or less. So we do have a lot to talk about tonight. I'll start off with the good. We had a fantastic 4th of July celebration. We all need to pat ourselves on the back for that. As you know, last week we had a significant flooding event. This is significant flood number 4 in the last calendar year. And I just want everybody to briefly recall when we were budgeting for the fiscal year 25, there was a lot of conversation about allocating liquid assets on hand to offset future tax rates. And the argument was made that we do have these unanticipated, unbudgeted events happening. We don't have any totals yet, but it's looking like damage to town roads is going to be in excess of $3 million. That's money that the town needs to lay out. Just putting that out there. And as we all know, there's been significant political chaos and violence over the last week. So, you know, everybody's tempers are up there. Just kind of calling it out for what it is. Before I begin, would anybody care to make a public comment? Jay?
Very briefly, I'm going to wear my hat as president of the board of Mount Mansfield Community Television. We have a very conversational meeting style where people will just chime in from their seat. People sitting in this corner are basically not being heard. People over here, we have a mic, you can be heard, but it's still better to come up. I've talked to Josh and David about getting on the agenda, getting some condenser mics for those corners, but for right now, just chiming in from the back, it's just coming across as mumble. So when people are talking tonight, it's very helpful if you would come up to the table.
Also, just a friendly reminder, after you're called on, everybody knows everybody, but for the record, we need you to state your name for the record. Okay, I did see a bunch of hands fly up here. Mary, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Mary Hull. 3 things, and I will be brief. I'm going to use an analogy of I'm going to lend you my lawnmower and I want it back, so I'm going to come pick it up. Please use the same analogy for the gravel that's going down the river. I paid for that gravel, as did everyone in here. So you come retrieve that. And if we change the thinking, rather than dredging the rivers, we'll call it harvest. And we'll call it something that's already paid for, and we'll call it organic. So those 3 buzz things ought to get it to work. Hate to say I told you so. That's the flooding by the railroad. And the last item, thank you. Item E on your agenda, it says discussion of a executive session on land that we already own. This is not appropriate for executive session. It is not something we are purchasing. I don't see a lawyer in here that's going to be involved with that. It's not developing anything that has a relationship to police contracts. So let's not go into executive session for something. I learned that from Steve Goodkind when I went to those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Aaron?
Aaron Farr, I was just, thank you. Aaron Farr, I was just hoping that in a future select board meeting, we could talk about what the town has for resources if we ever have to evacuate people. Seeing this flood and the amount of water and how fast it came. I know there were a few evacuations, but from our vantage point, it seemed like, I know when the ARPA cards came out, that was something I had put on ours, was like, what do we do if we have to evacuate people? Where would people go? And with these volumes of water that we got, it seems like people in different areas than just downtown were affected. And it would be a good thing to know what our plan is, publicize it, and make sure we are prepared if we ever had to evacuate people.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. Moving into our warned agenda. Josh?
Deletions.
Pardon?
Additions, deletions.
Yes. Do we have additions or deletions to tonight's agenda?
I just have one addition, an update from the Round Church Women's Run, which I guess I could give now, but basically they're not going to have the event this Saturday. They're going to do it virtually.
Oh,
If you want to add that as an official item, we can have that there, but that's the update, so they're not gonna, out of respect for everything the town's gone through the last week.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Josh regarding that news?
Just
Okay,
for clarity, are we gonna be talking during the flood section?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
If there's a flood-related topic, yes.
Yes, perfect.
something's ringing. Now it stopped. Okay, so item A. Josh, did you want to take that? Did you want me to take that? Jay, did you
Or
want to
Jay
take that?
wanna take it for
I
4th of
would
July?
rather not.
Okay.
4th of July?
I was on the committee. I don't want to thank
Okay.
myself.
Thank you. So I guess, you want me to take it or you?
You can
Okay.
take it.
So,
I'll just have an observation to make.
Okay.
Seemed to be a lot of golf carts cycling
Mhm.
through, like 3 would come,
same
2
golf
would
cart
go,
over and
2 would come, 1 would go. What was up with that?
We forgot to feed the hamsters.
Oh. And a couple of people have noticed that the Grand Marshal was in Saab convertibles for the last 2 years in a row. Okay, Josh.
so, just a moment to say thank you to the 4th of July committee. This is, I think, their second year reformed as this committee putting on the 4th of July parade after we had, I think, 2 years of a pause due to COVID. And, we've come back, I think, very strong with the 4th of July. Heard a lot of very positive comments. I wasn't able to see the parade myself, but heard it was great. I was at the green for most of the afternoon and back for the fireworks. A lot of smiling faces, a lot of people out enjoying the 4th of July. I know it's a lot of work by the committee to put that on, and lots of other volunteers to come together for the parade and for the fun run and to run the booths and everything. So thank you for everybody for putting on a great celebration for the town of Richmond.
Definitely. Kara?
Carol at Mount T. I just want to thank the committee for all the hard work. I think it's a generational tradition to have the parade in Richmond and the fireworks. And I really want to appreciate all of the hard effort and stuff like that. I have one minor request. Don't put all the fire trucks back to back. And maybe limit other towns to send one fire truck instead of having, 20 fire trucks and 3 floats. Just a recommendation, spread out the fire trucks, put a float in between maybe every once
I'll pass
in
that
a
on.
while. And I don't know if there's anything against, throwing candy or throwing something to the kids. I know I'd love to have an update, not now, but at some point, just an
No.
update on what the policy is there, because, if you send a fire truck, maybe, Richmond Fire Department did free ice cream scoops. Maybe if somebody wants to send their fire truck from another town, they set up at Volunteers Green and they do something for the community too. We appreciate that mutual aid situation, but just an idea to add to the festivities.
Yeah, I would like to comment, not specifically because Kara called it out, but just in general. One comment that we did hear from a lot of people was the danger factor of people throwing candy into the street and little kids scrambling under the wheels. That's something that we have historically asked the vendor, the parade floats to fling the candy harder to get it into the crowd. When the Magic Hat Mardi Gras parade was still a thing in Burlington, I was often a volunteer for that, and we actually had people whose sole job it was to walk along with the floats, pick the candy up and fling it on into the crowd so that we didn't have kids run over. And we would have loved to do that, but we simply had no volunteers. So that's something that we need to reiterate even harder. Do not throw candy directly into the street, get it to the kids or find some other option.
And I think that's the recommendation, is that the people walking with the floats or walking beside the fire trucks, that kind of thing, that those people can distribute versus weaning out of a window, helps that issue.
Mm.
But I know I grew up in Richmond. I know that was a big thing as a kid to
For
be able
sure.
to sit there and, pick up some candy or get some
Oh,
candy.
absolutely. We just
So-
want it to be safe.
So maybe that's the recommendation, is the people walking
walk-
beside
Yeah.
can distribute versus and hit people in the head.
No,
Thank you, guys. I appreciate
yeah,
all your work, though. It's
just
wonderful.
an open invitation to anybody listening now or later at the recording. We are always looking for more volunteers, and we're very grateful for the volunteers we got, but we could always use some more.
So I'll just say the 1 year I drove my fire truck, I can't see in front of the truck.
Right.
So I was constantly looking ahead, but kids were running and it was very scary.
Yep.
You need an outrider.
I do. Somebody to walk in front of it. Okay, Josh, did you want to take up update on flood recovery?
Sure. So first of all, a big thank you to the town staff that worked to prepare for the flood, during the flood and after the flood for response to all the damages from the flood. Prior to the flood, the highway department checked culverts and ditches for debris, moved trash cans out of the park to higher ground. Water and sewer made sure that the water tank was full of water and isolated it from the system to avoid a boil water notice. They emptied holding tanks in the wastewater treatment facility to provide extra storage in anticipation of additional increased flow. During the storm, the highway department was on scene most of the night, closing roads as water made them impassable. Fire department was assisting highway and responding to calls, which included evacuating people from homes and rescuing people who were trapped in between overtopped culverts in their cars. And the water effluent pipe backed up, and Steve Cody, the superintendent, worked throughout the night to minimize the amount of flooding that was happening in the wastewater treatment facility. Thursday morning, despite a long night, everybody was back at it early. Highway moved out, started to triage the work, and started immediately repairing roads and damaged driveway culverts within the right of way. We also quickly hired 2 contractors who were on scene to continue to expedite the process of repairing the roads and restoring access. The fire department continued to respond for calls for assistance and began to pump basements. And the wastewater treatment facility, Steve Cody got it back up online extremely quickly and was able to return to accepting septage by Friday. He got everything cleaned up. The pump house did flood, but because the system was isolated, we didn't have to go on a boil water notice. We're living off of the water tank. They're doing testing right now on the well, and as soon as those tests come back passable, we'll be hooking that up. That's anticipated hopefully by tomorrow. So we did have multiple roads that have sustained a tremendous amount of damage. There were multiple roads that were cut off. That was sort of the first priority of the highway department, was to go repair those that they could repair quickly to provide access back on the public roads. Also, there were lots of driveway culverts that are in the town right away, in the town ditch system. Those are repaired very quickly as well. Volunteers, and that work is ongoing. Since Thursday, Pete and his crew have worked tirelessly to continue to repair roads. We've now have 4 contractors working on roads, and we soon to probably have a 5th, as there's some large damage on West White Hill that has a large landslide that needs to be addressed very, very quickly. I think that at the end of the day today, we've got Hillview back in shape except for one break across it. So I think that that's the last road that we were waiting on access. Actually, BSAW still has to have a temporary repair done. Pete's anticipating hopefully getting that done by the end of this week. It's at least a temporary fix to provide access to that road. But there's still a lot of damage to be done. So even though Snipe Island and Stage Road are open to 1 lane, we're really asking people to reduce that to just local traffic. We have contractors up there right now, and every vehicle that passes, they have to stop their work, let the car pass. So the least amount of traffic we can have on those roads, the quicker they will be back to 2-lane roads and fully operational. Volunteers Green was completely submerged once again. It was covered in river silt and mud. 2 trees by the baseball field fell down. The concession stand and restrooms were filled with water. They all need to be cleaned, restored. Harlan, who's a great resident and volunteer, went out and actually mucked out the restrooms for us. There's still lots of cleanup though that needs to be done there. Right now, it's of course not very high in the priority list. Usually highway goes over there and they take care of a lot of that work, but they have a lot of critical infrastructure that they're attending to right now. Multiple homes were flooded with basements and first floor living spaces. Zoning Administrator Tyler Masha has been trying to get as much information and visiting as many homes as he can that are damaged. So anybody who hasn't been visited by Tyler who has damage, please reach out to Tyler in the zoning department. He'll go out. So he'll do a substantial damage evaluation, which is important for future claims. Also, anyone who has private property damage, it's really important that they call 211 and report the damage, because part of the way this claim works is there could be a FEMA claim for the town. Most likely there will be, but we have to reach a threshold of damage for public damage, and that's damage to public infrastructure and roads. In talking with VTrans this morning, they're fairly confident that we'll hit that estimate in a couple of days for public assistance. But then there's a separate pot of money from FEMA that's for individual assistance. So that would be potentially helping homeowners with private driveways, roads, home damage. I'm not going to speak for FEMA, but once they need a threshold to reach that level as well to kick that in. And the way they calculate that is by the damages that are reported by Vermont 211. So the more people who call with damages, the higher that number goes. And then if Chittenden County is declared for individual assistance, then individual homeowners can potentially get some help from FEMA. There's also some assistance that can come from Vermont 211. So I encourage homeowners to call Vermont 211, explore funding options that they might have. But it's important, even if you don't want funding from 211, report your damage because it helps everybody with a high threshold. Let's see. And also I want to thank President Susan Whitman. Last year, she set up camp out front here for a week after the flood to help do a volunteer response. This year, her home was cut off from a damaged road, but she was literally one of the first text messages I got Thursday morning. I'm setting the form up again, reaching out to organize volunteers. So she did what she could virtually to try to help deploy volunteers to anybody that needed them, and she continues to do that. So I think that gets us pretty well up to where we're at today.
Josh, can you just briefly describe the contrast with your Thursday morning call with emergency management as far as storm predictions and what we got?
Oh, on Wednesday night. Yeah, so I started to track this storm. I think it was on Monday. I started to hear there was something brewing, but sort of started to keep an eye on the weather forecast, the gauge in Essex Junction, which they have a really good chart there that says, you know, if it gets to 14 feet at Essex, we can expect some minor flooding in Richmond. Up to 15, we start to get more inundation in Volunteers Green. And then beyond that, we get a lot more flooding. Until Wednesday morning, they were predicting a peak of, I think, about 9.5 feet. So it looked like, okay, we might be okay on river flooding. By Wednesday afternoon, that had gone up to, I think, it hooked up to about 11 feet or so. So it looked like it was getting a little more serious. But even at 4 o'clock briefing that I went to with the state and the National Weather Service, they really didn't predict a lot of river flooding at that one. They said, yeah, we'll get 3 inches of rain. The tributaries will run fast at high volume. We'll get some road damage from that. But they thought, their words were, I think, yeah, maybe some minor field flooding in Richmond. Obviously, and I think even up until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, you know, it didn't look like it was raining that hard. The early reports from the road crew at 8:30 was things are okay. But by 9:30, that had dramatically changed. And we started to see a lot of side flooding on the tributaries, lots of road damage. And then I think by 1 o'clock in the morning, the water was so high in the river, you couldn't get across Bridge Street. And it really happened.
Right.
Jay?
I just want to reiterate something that David alluded to at the start of this. Last year, with last year's floods, we went over budget for highway maintenance by $500,000. I think that's a ballpark.
It was about $500,000 claim, yes.
Yeah. That's money that we're theoretically eligible to get back from FEMA at some point. To put that into context, we lost a culvert on Thompson Road in 2019 during the Halloween deluge that we got, and we got that money back last fall.
I think it was about a year after the final completion of the repair.
Right.
And another way to put it in context is we still haven't been paid for any of the major damages that happened last year.
Right.
The FEMA process is very slow and time consuming.
Correct. So that $500,000 is money that in principle we should get back at some point. But to contrast that with this year, the flooding went down, I think, faster this year than it did last year, but the damage to roads was significantly greater. Until it's all done, we don't have a formal bill that says it totaled $3 million, but our staff are pretty good at, and the state are pretty good at estimating. And if you've looked at Stage Road, and if you looked at, well, I mean, I live on Murray Drive, and past my house, the road is just pretty much gone. It wasn't that bad last year. So $6 million, $3 million, $1 million, it's going to be a lot more than it was last year. And in terms of can we absorb that into our budget the way we were able to just barely squeak in last year? No. This year, there's really no way around it. We're going to have to, I don't see any other way, unless the state just mails us a large box of money, is we're going to have to take out a loan. And then, like I said, at some point, FEMA will reimburse us, but
Hopefully.
But will they cover the interest on that loan? We don't know. That's still a TBD, but it's gonna make budgeting and financial stuff for the town very difficult for the next year or two.
Anybody else have any comments? Anybody from the audience?
Yeah, Hi, I'm Shay Coco from Lily Pond Circle. I think if I can, Josh, I'm gonna just try to share my screen because I want to give you an update on what's going on Lily Pond, O'Neill, Red Barn Lane, and part of Route 2. And it's probably just helpful to have some visuals here to do that.
Misspelled O'Neill.
I don't think I did, actually. Oh, yeah, I spelled the E and the I, but it's not a capital N and there's no apostrophe, surprisingly. I don't know why. So I'm sort of a representative of the community of Lily Pond, Red Barn, O'Neill, and some folks on Route 2 are sort of stuck in between those streets and were affected by this. There's plenty of other folks from the community affected here that can jump in and correct me or add to what I'm saying, but we were hit shockingly hard. And frankly, we need your help and we need to figure out how to move forward because there's still a ton of impact happening right now. We're by no means recovered. There are still 10 homes that are cut off from a road that are using a makeshift path between two homes that
That's
is
O'Neill that's cut off, right?
correct.
Could you clarify? And because this has come up in this room several times before, and this is awkward because I totally appreciate what you're about to show us in terms of the significance and impact on the homeowners. But having gone down this path, sort of, so to speak, in the past, there have been difficult conversations about the public right of way and the public road versus private right of way and private road. So as you're describing this, could you just
100%.
be clear about what's in the public, what's a public road or public right of way and what's not?
Yeah, so I've actually, the next slide here is actually a map, which is gonna try to make it as clear as possible. But just to go, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, but this is some meaty stuff. So a couple topics. We had a couple of real challenges with the disaster response. Then I'll talk you through sort of what happened in these 21 homes. And then a clear request for help and assistance and some direction as to where we might get that help, which I know Josh has already been helpful with. But in terms of the disaster response, we had one resident on Red Barn Lane, Julie, who I don't think is here, who had to be swift boat evacuated by the state. And, you know, a number of residents were out in what became a pond, which was normally just a community, trying to get to her home, and we could not get there because the water was moving so quickly. It wasn't so deep, it was our waist or, you know, lower even in some places,
The current.
but the force of the current could not get us there. And according to her, I'll just read her what she said about the response, because I asked her, told her I was coming to this meeting. She said, I called 911 when water was rushing into my house. They sent out a fire truck. It took a while, but I could see the fire truck was on Route 2 in front of, by the house in front of my house. But then they just left. No one contacted me about next steps. I called 911 again. All they did was tell me to breathe. When I asked about their plan, they said they didn't have one. They were very not helpful. The only reason the swift boat came was I called a friend in a panic and she called the swift boat team to come and rescue me. So I think I can't say any more than that, but I think there needs to be some post-mortem for what transpired there. And secondarily, on Thursday morning, many of the residents of Lily Pond, Red Barn, O'Neill were still in this water trying to start to dig out. And we noticed that while we were in this water, including some of us in the river trying to assess how we can get some of these logs moved to start to relieve some of this pressure, we were seeing trucks go up Snipe Ireland Road, which is a public road, in order to fix the culverts. I think it was more than one that blew out up on Snipe. And the work that they did significantly raised the level of water that came into our neighborhood. And, you know, that's probably the natural occurrence when you start to do some work and relieve some pressure. But unfortunately, nobody came and checked first on the downstream people, and probably, presumably, but stupidly didn't know that there were people still in significantly deep water, and they raised the level of that water in a massive way and put people at real risk. So in the future, my recommendation, again, not an emergency responder, but there needs to be a post-mortem on how we can check downstream before some people start working upstream and inadvertently, I presume, releasing significant amount of water on the people below.
So if I just, to clarify, the first issue is Richmond Volunteer Fire Department. The fire truck came and left, right? So,
Correct.
because like none of us were there.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
And the
Route 2
second,
at that time was not underwater. It was clear.
okay,
Because Route 2,
Yeah.
I can show you the map here.
and where I'm going though is then the second one is the Richmond Highway Department, which are town staff.
Town Ctr, yeah, correct.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, just to put a better picture on the situation, Snipe Ireland Road on the far left there is a public road. Red Barn is the little road that's between Snipe and Lily Pond. That's a private road. Lily Pond is a private road, and O'Neill is a private road.
Folks in the audience can see better.
I can try.
That'd be great.
And then there's these weirdos down here at the bottom.
I know that just pops up on
I don't
Google,
know.
Jay, but
Oh, that's.
Um,
Yeah, yes, move, Jay.
so the people sort of most impacted here, as I zoom in further on this map, in terms of impacted on the flood side, are the people who are on Red Barn Lane, which is a private road, Route 2. There's 2 homes that are actually technically Route 2 addresses there, and Lily Pond Circle. The X marks the spot where a culvert jammed with debris, and it was just created a huge backup behind it, and eventually that broke through the riverbank and in large part created a massive amount of water that came into this neighborhood. And so everybody above that X, which is 10 households, is currently blocked from going to their homes. You cannot get a propane truck up there. You cannot get a fire truck up there. They are stranded up there. But for myself and Brian and Jackie Dobbs, we live on Lily Pond Circle. We've allowed to go through our backyard, potentially over a water line. We're not exactly sure where the water line is, but that's the only way in and out of O'Neill Drive right now. The folks on Lily Pond, Red Barn, and Route 2, that's 11 households, which were severely impacted by this. This is the scene on Snipe Island Brook. The top picture there is a view looking it's standing on the upstream, looking downstream at the bridge culvert that I was just referencing.
On
You can
O'Neill.
see on O'Neill. So that's where you can see it looks like just a bunch of trees. They are sticking into these 2 culverts, which you can see below.
So there would have been a road there were it not for this.
There was a road there on top of those 2 culverts
Okay.
that was washed away. And so this is the same exact scene, just from different sides, looking downstream, looking upstream. And then this is what looks, this is the gap when you look at it from the closed off side of O'Neill on the top there.
That's today.
That's right now. That's a
Okay.
35 to 40-foot gap. And then below is an image of the current makeshift solution that goes between the DeCoco and Dobbs properties, which is the only way the O'Neill folks have access to their homes. This is just a brief map I put together of the impact that took place on Red Barn and Lily Pond. We have 11 homes there, which took on water. 6 homes are severely damaged, and severely damaged is first floor flooding, some up to waist height. And all of those homes are currently being gutted in some form or another. A huge shout out to Susan and the 100 or so volunteers that she's put together to come out. It's been an overwhelming response. People getting into some gross, hard work and bringing food if they weren't up for that. It's just been amazing to see the community come together yet again. The houses in yellow are, less affected. That includes my house, where, we gutted our garage, but not, water inside the home in a major way. So, but I will say those homes in red, I think if you were to come down and see it, you would be pretty shocked by the level of destruction.
And just to back up.
Yeah.
I know like last year's flood, people in Esplanade got clobbered, but that's just the rivers rising. In this case, it's the force of water that did a lot of the damage, right?
Yeah, I mean, we got some water that came into this area last year, but nowhere near,
But so much water was basically coming down that slope that it was hitting, not just.
yeah, it was a number. I mean, anybody can jump in here, but I do talk to it in a latter slide here, and this isn't that long of a presentation, but it sort of shows there was numerous issues up this brook
Mhm.
that will need to be looked at some point, and they ended up really affecting the people kind of at the bottom here. And that's what, you know, this is where sort of the water landed, right? Just a couple quick images. You can sort of see the water line there just hits the window, the bottom side of that window on a house on Red Barn. So you can kind of get a sense of how high the water came. And then this is Julie's house who got water evacuated. I mean, frankly, that drywall needs to be cut up higher, but we've already gotten the floors out, the drywall out, all the furniture out of this one home.
Okay, so the water was that high, but Route 2 proper was not underwater at this point. This is settling and pooling in your neighborhood, but not as a result of the river coming up.
So Route 2 is a whole other conversation because historically the water would flow from, if it ever flooded, it would flow from this brook into our neighborhood, and then it would flow over Route 2 and into the farmer's field across the way. Route 2, when it was reconstructed last year, was built 2 feet higher. So what we had was a basin, basically.
Right.
They created a giant pool that in no small part created a lot of this damage. I mean, we have to figure out how to stop the water from coming in, and then we have to figure out how to get the water out. And right now you can't get the water out because when they raised it 2 feet, they did not add any additional drainage.
Mary?
I need to add something, Mary Hool. Towns, state are allowed to elevate property and hold you in a basin. They did that on my property, but they can elevate it 3 feet a year. So just to let
3 feet a
you know, it is within the parameter of the state or the town, because they did that to my property years ago. And we have a basin that's still got loads of water in it, but just so that you know, they don't have to notify anybody either. They just do it. Thank you.
You know, this is sort of this is the picture a couple hours ago. This is Red Barn Lane, which is just embedded in mud. You cannot get a vehicle to or from that house. And then we lost 6 cars, and I know at least 1 RV. You can sort of see how high the water is there. So this is sort of that picture I was alluding to of, you know, this is sort of zooming out on Richmond. I wish you could see it a little bit better. I'm happy to share this after the fact, but at the top of the screen there, you've got Richmond Pond, which is at the, you know, probably top, if not middle way up Snipe Ireland or just off. Apparently that drained in large part. We're not exactly sure why, but I believe the hearsay is beaver dams broke up there and started draining into the brook, you know, drastically increasing the water along with the rain. And then they had at least 1, maybe 2 Snipe Ireland culvert failures, which probably contributed to the flow going into, you know, these culverts that were at the bottom of this hill. I mean, this is obviously an incredibly steep hill that this water is coming down, not unlike Stage, but quite a bit steeper. There were drainage issues that presumably there was some diversion done by the power company when they worked on the power lines. There's been water coming into our neighborhood from a place that has never come in before, based on some work they did. And obviously we could, you know, let you see that with inspection and you would see exactly how that came to be. I've kind of pointed out where the O'Neill failure was, where that flooded area was, and then how Route 2 sort of became, you know, acted like that basin. And here's what Route 2 looks like as you turn into Lily Pond Circle. That little ramp was not there last year. So that's a significant part of the challenge here. So, you know, not an easy conversation, but we are in bad shape. You cannot get to O'Neill Drive. I do not live on O'Neill Drive, and nor do I, you know, want to, considering the challenges that they're facing to get that road back open. But we think that they're considering the impact of 21 households here. We think there's a strong case for the town to take ownership of a section of this private road from Snipe Ireland to the end of what is now a washed away bridge. Because otherwise we don't know how anybody could possibly get this done correctly to prevent a reenactment of this next year or the year after.
So this is by no way to minimize or fail to recognize the impact of what you've experienced from this flooding. But I'll say how to introduce this, and I'll introduce as I've done this at least twice before. That in my role, having taken an oath of office to abide by the statute and regulations of the state and the town, and I'm obligated by my oath of office to represent the interests of the town, that there are cases like this where the interests of the town may not exactly align with the interests of the property owners, i.e. you.
Who are town taxpayers, 21 of them.
I totally understand, but let me keep going. So that's why there are private roads versus public roads, and historically, the towns under state statute, regulation, town ordinance have not and do not contemplate addressing failures in private roads, because it also sets precedent to do it for every private road failure forever. So that's the conversation we've had with our attorney in the past. It's come up about flooding into Esplanade. We were in this room, I think, a year ago. And people said, because the water came from up there, it must be the town's responsibility to mitigate it. The town, VLCT, our attorney, the position across the board is it's really not, and you don't want to because of the precedent of using public funds to address a private problem. That's not a great explanation. I know you don't want to hear it, but I'll say this is how it's been addressed in the past, and I understand there's 21 taxpayers. But we get into this sort of sticky wicket of where does the town's responsibility lie in addressing very significant problems, and I don't want to minimize that, on what's currently a private road.
Totally, yep. Yeah, so
We're in an update portion on the agenda tonight. What you're asking for here are action items. So I'd suggest we put this on our agenda for our first meeting in August. Legally, we can't take any action tonight because this isn't a warrant agenda.
It was not
item.
warned as an action.
So, and the reason I want to keep going briefly is to say, so we won't really get to that. But if I were in your seat, I would try to come up with a best case. Where is the legal precedence or
Yeah.
justification for the town to step in and like spend money on what is currently a private road? And is there precedent for that? And I'll say, having seen I know somebody who lives in Montpelier for over a year, has lived in a house that has like plastic sheeting because the FEMA funding hasn't come through to do repairs and elevation of the house. The city of Montpelier is not paying for that. She's sitting there waiting for FEMA dollars to come through. And that's, again, probably something you don't want to hear, but I've seen that personal experience from that house in Montpelier. And it's just an awful situation for her.
let's not join the race to the bottom then. Let's try to do better than that.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna interrupt.
I'm sorry.
Could you come up and say your name?
If we continue
Name,
down the
please.
road, it's Brian Dobb.
Thank you.
If we continue down this road, we're just starting hurricane season.
Yeah.
We're gonna get washed out again and again and again until there's no houses left down there.
You're right.
All I'm telling you is how I am compelled to look at this and under statutes and regulation and my oath of office. And it's not at all, I understand what you want to hear.
It's poor.
It is.
I don't have a budget item or the legal authority to do this we've addressed it in similar situations in the past. I'm certainly open to be educated. If you know something that I don't know or our attorney doesn't know, but I don't want to flog it here. I suggest that that's something you want to prepare for in the next conversation when you come back with an ask.
Jay?
Okay, so I'm not an attorney. My sister is, I'm not. One thing that potentially, I'm not an attorney, I'm just gonna stress this, may potentially make this situation a little different than some of the other please fix my private road scenarios, is whatever legal extent we are responsible for delivering this water from town-owned culverts from Snipe Ireland Road to the Lily Pond, Red Barn, O'Neill neighborhood. As I said, please,
Same.
yeah, well, if
Tilden Avenue,
Hmm?
stormwater drain comes under I live on Tilden Avenue, by the way. So it spills off Jericho Road to Tilden Avenue. There is some infrastructure up there, comes underneath. The folks on Esplanade point out that where the water originated that was pooling there came from Tilden Avenue.
Oh,
So
I
along the way, it came through a town culvert.
I understand that, but where the situation seems to me to be a little different is we have X amount of water in the Red Barn, O'Neill, Lily Pond neighborhood. Then work is done on culverts high up on Snipe Island Road,
See,
and
Yeah.
now the water doubles or triples. That's what makes this scenario, in my mind, and I'm not an attorney, a little different than some of the other scenarios, because a case could be made that because of our town actions, we bear some liability for this, but I'm not an attorney, so I don't know.
I mean, I
You
think.
can't
I-
take that to the bank.
I don't think that the amount of, to their point, I mean, the initial deluge of water wasn't because of the town stuff.
The
just to be
initial,
clear.
correct.
But the secondary one that was dangerous was.
Thank you. Mary Hall, I have a
Well,
little
can I-
experience.
Hold on just a
Hang on,
second.
One second, I don't,
Adam is still talking.
Sorry.
Put off on.
I just want, I don't want to say that there was a second deluge of water, that's the responsibility of the town. I think that would bear more
To be
investigation.
clear, there was no
Right.
town
I'm
employees.
not
ever
saying it
there.
But when I
Right.
checked in with the contractor who was up there doing the work and with Pete, they both said, well, the water was already going across the road where the break was. We put the culvert back where it needed to be, so the water continued to go across the road through the culvert. So they didn't, it wasn't like water was flowing down the other side of the road, they diverted it back.
Mhm.
They put it back the way that it had been, and that's what the town does when we have the break
Right.
in the road.
And as
Now,
a result.
I just
water-
don't wanna, I mean, if there's further investigation and I'm wrong, okay, but that's my understanding of it.
Right, and I'm not saying I'm not saying you are wrong, I'm just saying that is a little bit, doing our town job up here had negative side effects down here,
Hey.
but what would we have done, say, don't replace the culvert on Snipe Ireland, because it might flood down, it's a mess, it's a sticky wicket, no matter how you describe
And I
it.
think it's I think it's a maybe, like, I don't know that doing that work, and Pete can maybe speak to it if he has a better way to explain it, but I don't know that doing that work increased the flow.
And I don't either, I'm not a hydrological engineer or an engineer, but
So we won't resolve that tonight.
No,
Right.
we obviously would disagree. I mean, it wasn't raining when this happened. But I get that that's an argument that is taken up in a separate, period of time. But we're in a scenario now where we can't wait for decisions for 2 weeks. I mean, we've got 10 households that are completely cut off.
Have you guys got any?
Yes, thank you. Not a stranger to flood issues.
come up to the mic.
Thank you. Very cool. Not a stranger to flood issues. The engineering that is initially done for all these culverts to be placed wherever they're placed on town roads, town property, state roads are engineered. They're not just something like I decided I was gonna put in an 18-inch culvert. And some folks don't like to hear it. I didn't like to hear it when it was told to me. The water that happens, you can't, like, when you had heard, Josh, that it was gonna be X amount and it turned out to be twice as much per se, it's pretty much called an act of God. When this, we don't control how much the rain comes down, but when the culverts are engineered specifically by an engineer and the town engages the proper tools and banking and all the prep work to set it, it's not set it and forget it, but just the idea that if the culvert wasn't big enough, you can't set the culvert for a 1,000-year storm. You have to set the culvert for what is engineered. So I understand that the water may have come from something that's in town, but we don't own the water. The town doesn't own the water, and it is an act of God. And it's not nice to hear these things, but we have a zoning person here. Is this a zoned flood area? Do you folks have flood insurance to help you? Again, from my experience, the flood insurance will not touch your roads, your culverts. It will, however, help you with structures, and that's not a pleasant thing to hear, but even when the flood insurance didn't cover my flooded property, I still had to carry flood insurance on a condemned property for 3 years before the buyout. So you don't like to hear these things, but for future, you're talking about future rains in the beginning of the hurricane season. Your banks are going to start requiring these if you don't already, but banks, or excuse me, flood insurance will not cover driveways. They will not cover culverts, and the water that came through, it was too much for me too, but it's just the idea that all of these culverts that are set are engineered. They're not, it's not like, I'm drafting up proposals for setting them. So it's very hard to hear. I do understand that, having been on the receiving end of flooding. I am sorry for all your distress and for all the issues, but I don't think the select board is going to be able to commit to an answer. I was on the select board for a number of years. And once the town accepts work on a private road, it's ownership. And that's unfortunate. And yes, I understand, there's 21 homeowners that are taxpayers, but you're also taxpayers on private roads, private access. And the water that came in from somewhere else came because it was too high for what was engineered. But you can't engineer for 1,000 years. You have to engineer for what is the norm. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kara?
Carla Bounty, and I've had experience with FEMA since, you all know, since about 2011, since the the digital floodplain maps were rescinded by the federal government and then reestablished in 2014. I need to make a comment to Jay's comments. I don't want to give you guys false hope. I'll bet money on the table. The town will take no responsibility, no matter how much you ask for the private road work. It's historically never happened. I don't think you're going to find legal precedents that's going to prove that it's going to help. So I really want you to understand that the areas that could help you most would be potentially state funding that is available funding that matches FEMA funding, or they have other funds also, because I helped relocate a home out of the floodplain in Bolton, and they found funding in a different bucket than what it was originally meant for. So I'm saying the state has some resources, and the quicker one to the table gets it, the longer you wait to try to really look into that. The town doesn't have the resources. They're not going to they got $3 million worth of damage to their own that they're going to have to go get a loan for. I don't want to give you false hope. I don't want you to think that the town is going to help at all. You got to pool your resources now and fix what you can fix to the best of your ability. And you might even have to have it engineered, but not all 21 homes are cut off. It's O'Neill Drive that's cut off. The other homes, I volunteered to begin with to help write some of the FEMA grants. So my heart's in it with you guys, but I don't want you to have false hope. I will bet money on the table. The town doesn't have the resources or the ability or the legal precedents to step up and help you. There are going to be private places that might have funding sources. I'm going to sound something crazy and say, honestly, even a GoFundMe might get you more money quicker.
It's already up.
Okay, then and get the word out about that. But the 211 reporting is very, very important, and we need the town to send a specific front porch forum posting that's not diluted with a bunch of other things. That's a call for action for everybody who experienced. I mean, my daughter's driveway, going to be $15,000 worth of damage to her individual driveway. She doesn't have the ability to pool money with any other neighbors to fix a private road. I mean, that's significant. That is a huge impact on just a driveway. So I understand you guys, and if I could help, I would. There are resources, but we need the call to report to 211 because that gets the private roads potential funding and the private homes extra help. So my heart goes out to you. If there's anything I can do to help, I would. But I'm going to tell you, the only road, and this is where it's not the uphill water coming down into an area. You're looking at years down the road of lawsuits that you're not going to win. I haven't seen one yet that's been successful. And I've been watching this stuff since 2011, and we're in 2024. So
Okay.
I've got to say,
So following up to what Kara just said, I don't want to give false hope either. What I was attempting to do during my questions was to make sure I understood your point of view. I can't promise anything. As I said, I'm not an attorney or a hydrological engineer. I was just trying to make sure I understood that you're, as opposed to other flooding situations in town, your point of view is that the action on Snipe Ireland Road contributed to what you're dealing with.
Oh,
And
there's no question.
yeah.
But if it was a beaver dam that released, that's even worse against.
Then we need to sue the beavers. No, that's, I
Well,
don't
that's-
like to use humor in this case,
But I
but
think-
they're
I think-
dealing with some serious stuff.
I think that when we talk about asking the town's help in taking over the road and jump in, but from what we understand, it's quite difficult for private roads to get state funding and federal funding. It is not nearly as difficult for public roads to get state funding and federal funding. And so if the town of Richmond were to take over, we're talking about a 50-yard stretch of road here, including that bridge.
Right.
There will be far greater likelihood of a grant being successful to fund
Okay.
that bridge.
And that may well be true. I can't speak to that, but one of the things that you said a few minutes ago was, this can't wait 2 weeks. So and this was not warned as an action item, so we actually are somewhat limited in what we can do.
But we did reach out to try to get it on the agenda. I mean, this obviously,
There's a limit to how close.
well, there's a flood that happened on Thursday. You can't.
Right, it makes it difficult. But if everything came out exactly the way you'd like, what would you envision us to, if hypothetically things worked out that we took ownership of that stretch of the road, it would still be difficult to fix it as fast as we can because the town's resources are 100% committed dealing with the damage to the roads we do own.
Yeah, no question. First is a short-term solution.
Mhm.
Fill it back in, allow the residents in and out. I mean, allow fire trucks to get up there. I mean, it's a safety hazard. And second, get a real, state body, federal body to fund an engineer to put a permanent solution there that is 2 or 3 times more drainage than this is, which is what, Tyler Billingsley was out there this morning and he's like, this needs to be 2 or 3 times bigger than it is.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yes.
My name's Kath Burns and I live on Lily Pond. I also have a property here in town, the Farm Bureau building. And a question that I have that's related, I really appreciate the fiscal question. It's a reality. You can't just come up with millions of dollars out of thin air. And there's a tension here between the state doing what they want, and Mary left, but I appreciated, and thank you for your empathy. I appreciated what she said. The state can do what they want with their roads, but at what point does the town take issue with that? Because it's affecting your budget directly.
Well, I would like to address that.
Yeah, because it seems like a source of funding would be to figure out how to work with the state to stop that, because they've actually created and continue to create millions of dollars of damage. Our building took water on and our community here.
There's
So thank you very
storied-
much.
No, hang on. There's a
Oh.
very storied history of town losses due to state infrastructure, and the town of Richmond has vehemently protested
Mhm.
and asked for retribution and assistance, and it's gotten nowhere. I'll be more than happy to share those stories with you.
Well, and a quick
Frustrated.
example would be what's happening out of the culvert out toward the interstate.
Yeah.
Where the state filled in that thing on 99 directly caused.
Yeah.
And the state is basically going crickets. They're not listening to us.
So
I'm interested.
to jump into the, speaking of somebody who sat on the Regional Planning Commission for a while, the Regional Planning Commission has a role in guiding state funding, local funding. There is not a magic to these grant funds. The town roads are maintained by the town. We get some state funds
Yeah.
to do that. But the state, at least historically, has not stepped in and said, oh, you have a $3 million problem, we'll pay for that. Or, oh, this private road failed, we'll engineer it, we'll pay for the engineering, we'll pay for the reparations. I have never seen that, for what that's worth. And I'm not saying it's impossible, it's just, I've never seen it in 8 years on the Regional Planning Commission. And they have different types of projects. It's easier to get funding for the engineering of a project than it is for the construction of a project. So that still has a 20% match obligation if you can get it funded at the 80%.
Mhm.
And so I'm not saying, not that none of this could ever happen. I'm just saying I have, at least in my limited experience, never seen it happen yet, especially on a private road.
I think I would offer that, and then I'll get out of the way. I would offer that while it's always happened that way, I think fiscally, we're in big trouble in our town because
We
it
are-
could rain really hard again in another week and
It
then
will.
I'll be out of my home, probably
tomorrow.
having a similar experience to Mary, which I feel terrible about. But I don't know how to be part of the solution, but I'm interested. Because it feels like the state will be applying for federal funds. They're going to be going for disaster declaration. And who can we, and I'm speaking for myself, we haven't talked about this as a group, but
Yeah.
who can we talk to advocate? Because this is not tenable. Our town can't afford.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
So I think it was Josh that described earlier on the split between public and private FEMA funding.
Mhm.
Since FEMA is federal, right?
Yeah.
If I were in your seat, I might call my senator or congressman and say,
Sure. I think she was gonna visit one of them.
I
was
got a
gonna visit.
problem with this. Can you throw one of your caseworkers or,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
support
that.
staff at this? Because that is a federal entity. People come with problems with social security, with
I'm
Medicare, all
familiar.
sorts of federal stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's one suggestion, because we will tend to focus on the public sector issues that are known town roads, town right of way.
Mm.
Earlier, we heard examples of like private funding from FEMA for house elevation.
Mhm.
So that's got its own kind of pathway. Kara
Yep.
was talking about that. That is a separate pathway. People have been involved. It's also tough in a small town when we have people running in place to deal with the damage that they're dealing with
Yeah.
on the town roads.
Yeah.
And not necessarily expert on the private sector FEMA issues or other sources of funding for them.
Okay, Kara, then Tyler. Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you.
Josh, didn't see your hand.
I just put it up. It's okay.
I just wanted to address the question about the town taking care of this right now and filling in the hole and doing that kind of thing, about the ownership of a section of the road. There's a whole policy and procedure for how the town takes ownership of private roads, and it's a whole legal action item, and the road has to be built to the spec and inspected and all of those kinds of things. So that can't happen based on how Richmond has it already set up and the structure. And as far as FEMA paying for a private road that then becomes public ownership, it's date of incident versus date of incident and type of road at that time. So you can't get the private road rolled into a public road to get it fixed. It's not gonna happen. It won't happen because it's who owned it, what was it when the event occurred? And then the whole procedure with how the town takes ownership of a road and what the roads have to be and the specs that they have to be to it. So I'm trying to make sure there's not false hope out there and not a misunderstanding of how things are. I strongly recommend to the select board another action item for down the road for future flooding events, et cetera, is maybe create a flood recovery committee that helps assist private residents and
Yeah, good
prepares
idea.
for public recovery actions after that, that you have systems in place and we know where to send you. Like, here are funding sources, here are resources. Contacting your local representatives doesn't necessarily help. I'll let you know that too. We've been in touch with Leahy's office, Sanders' office, when Leahy was in office. Thank you. Sorry about that. That's how far back I'm going. And Welch, in the end, it was just a phone call. There wasn't a lot of action taken. It was more so, I honestly had to train myself and learn how to write a FEMA buyout grant and learn how to write FEMA elevation grants. So anybody wants to be trained in any of that, I'll volunteer time to help somebody start that process. That's a committee that could be a committee that's trained in how to help people and how to do this. But I don't want false hope. Your best bet is to get private resources, is to go directly to the state and ask for other funding sources and to pool your money now to get the road passable. As far as future flooding events and how things can be built better and things like that, that's got to, right now the town's doing the best they can on their own roads. They don't even have their own roads two lanes passable. So if it's you or whoever that's got that temporary road to allow people through, thank you. I mean, I'm thanking you for those folks, but I don't want false hope. The town is not going to get FEMA funding for any private roads, period. It's not going to happen.
Tyler?
Yeah, just some comment in there. Tyler Mayshift, the record, Richmond Planning and Zoning Administrator. So just to reiterate, so FEMA as a general rule, right? When you look at the NFIP program and what they typically cover with disasters, it typically applies to just the principal structure. However, as was the case in our last disaster, they do issue disaster specific guidelines that, for example, in most cases, they don't generally cover driveways or private roads. However, in Vermont's case with the last disaster, and that was on a FEMA document me and Josh were looking at together. I forget the exact title of it, but it was dated August of 2023.
As a
la-
result of last July's.
last
flood.
July's, the disaster specific things that FEMA was making an exception to cover were in certain instances driveways and private roads if it was the only access onto property. Now, where this gets tricky is that each one of these disaster declarations are unique to that specific disaster. So just because they did it in August of last year does not mean that they will do it this year. So it's worth bearing that in mind. But if you do get that, that's where that individual assistance and that sort of other stuff that could potentially be applied to that, if that's something that they do. One thing that I am working on as of right now down there for any home that's in the special flood hazard overlay district, so that's floodplain, floodway. I am starting the process at least of doing substantial damage or improvement determinations. I was just at Red Barn tonight, actually about an hour or so before I came here. I did my initial site of that particular house. I'm going back tomorrow in the afternoon when I can get in. I split childcare, so I have to stay home for at least half the day, but I'll be in, and that's where I'll be tomorrow, at least doing that. So anybody has flood insurance, needs a substantial damage, wants to start that process, I'll be there doing it. You know, it's relatively unintrusive. I don't really need to ask you a ton of questions. I'm just gonna kind of do my thing, but that's what I'm doing. I just want to give a little update as to how that kind of works. Is it does depend on the specific disaster, what they do and don't cover.
Thank you, Tyler. Josh?
So I guess just to sort of maybe help put a bow on it a little bit, I think the first thing that you guys should probably try to look into is repairing O'Neill Drive. It's not going to be from the town, it's not going to be from the state. You need to get it repaired. And then you have a GoFundMe started already. I think that's a great idea. Assuming we get declared for individual assistance from FEMA, I would definitely apply to that. As Tyler said, it might be disaster specific as far as if they'll cover a road or not, but apply to that. Inform 211 to see if they can help you out with that as well. I've also heard from residents about Snipe Island Brook and other brooks in town. So like, this is not just Snipe Island. About the brook looks totally different. There's lots of material everywhere. It's changed course. What can I do? So I've reached out to the Department of Environmental Conservation from Vermont to ask guidance on, okay, what can we do in the midst of a disaster like this? And then once I get that guidance, I'll pass it along to you folks and others I've heard from as far as, okay, here's what you can do. Then you can contact a contractor to come in and do what you're able to do. Because I know the fear right now is if we get more rain,
Which we will.
that brook is now going to hit my house. It wouldn't have before the storm, but now it's going to. So as soon as I get guidance on what permits you need to apply for, or if that's waived because of the disaster, then I'll get that information out. But then you'll still have to contract with a private contractor to come in because it's private land. So that's sort of the short term. Tyler touched on what he can do with flood insurance. Related to that, long term, one thing that we can look into, we just got a grant to study the Winooski River floodshed, the watershed, with some mitigation opportunities or possibilities. The idea there is we're going to hire an engineer to look at that to say, well, how could we reduce flooding in the village or along the whole watershed in the Winooski? It's a pretty big project. I don't know how engineers are going to figure that out. But as I started to think about Snipe Island, it's a long brook. I'll reach out to these guys tomorrow to find out, is that grant still open? And if so, could it apply to a brook rather than a river? If it can apply to a brook, it's a long process. It's going to take some time. But if it can apply to a brook, it might be a long-term scoping project to figure out ways that that brook could be changed to mitigate it down the road. And then one final thing, for individuals, I think Tyler touched on it a little bit. Actually, Kara did. There are buyout and elevation programs that are happening. And basically what that means is that the buyout, FEMA will pay essentially market value for the house to the homeowner. They have an assessment process, so don't quote me that you're going to get market value, but it's close to that. Yeah, okay. And then they will also pay to have the land cleared, and then it becomes a green space and it turns back to the town. Problem with that is you lose your home, but you're no longer going to be threatened by flooding. The other project is an elevation project where they elevate the home above floodplain elevation. So that way the theory is when it floods, it passes underneath the home, it doesn't affect the home anymore. There are some parameters on that, so not every home will qualify. You have to be in the floodplain, there's some substantial damage. But if anybody's interested, please let me know. I've already got, I think, 12 properties in Richmond that are going through that process. And Kara, though it's a process, it's very long and lengthy. So that's more of a long term, but please reach out to me and I'll help you figure out if you're eligible.
Josh, there's also a third option.
Okay.
Third option, there's buyout, elevation, and relocation. If you have
Alright.
higher ground on your property that the home could be relocated to, or if you can maybe buy land from a neighbor that it can be a higher elevation, there's relocation as part of it as well, so that you don't lose your, you know, septic and your well and your power. You can just relocate the home.
Thank you.
Jay?
Okay, one real, do you have access to the meeting chat on your, since you're sharing?
Oh, I believe so, yeah.
Could you click the link I just put into the chat? Or, yeah, there you go. I didn't know that there was this GoFundMe, but this is the one that you guys were talking about, right? Okay,
I think this is, yeah, Nicole, yeah.
yeah, so, anybody listening or watching who does want to reach in their own pocket, I'm seeing you've raised about 7,000. That's a long way short of your $20,000 goal. Have you gotten a ballpark quote for how much it would take to get the road passable?
Who can speak to that? Is it? Yes.
My name is Nicole Davis. So we've gotten kind of three ballparks, somewhere between 16,000-20,000 on the low end, and then 40 was on the upper end.
I think it's be 35. That's my guess, 35.
Just to make it passable, not to.
Just to make
No,
it
that's my
possible,
understanding.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay, so it would not hurt for us to, you know, push this and things like front porch forum and so forth, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. If a lot of people in Richmond chipped in, we could get that road passable. I just donated, it doesn't show up yet, but I did. And right now, that may be the best option we've got, is just pushing the hell out of this thing. But you guys, I mean, you're literally my neighbors. I live in Murray Drive. I go by there all the time. You've got my utmost sympathy. I'm trying to think of what we can do right now, and this is right now maybe the best option we've got.
Yeah,
So
understood.
this is disaster level, the federal disaster level, is that where it triggers the non-insurance covered residents to get that? It was like $32,000 instant check within like 3 days of asking for money from
Right.
FEMA when Tropical Storm Irene hit.
I think it was it 32,000 or 3,200?
No,
32,000.
32,000.
I wasn't here during,
Yeah.
I wasn't here during Irene, so I don't know exactly, but I can try to find out.
Doesn't have flood insurance, just be aware that if the federal disaster gets recorded for us, it might trigger FEMA checks for folks who make a claim if you've had property damage to the house.
In the interest of time, I do want to just run through these last couple things and then we can return to the agenda if there's nothing else from, you know, the rest of the folks in the room. But as I started the conversation, some concerning things happened in the heat of the moment in the disaster. Would love to see the town take on a postmortem to make sure that things are better when we have another disaster with regard to the fire department and with regard to checking downriver before work is done upstream. I mean, if this does indeed become the private roads problem in perpetuity, we would ask that someone from the town or the select board at least help us understand how to get through this mess more quickly than we would be on our own. Because as you've pointed out, people have been through this before. We would obviously love your help, and we're dedicated to working with whoever it is that has that knowledge to make sure we're using that knowledge to progress this along as quickly as we can. You know, I mentioned the Route 2 being raised 2 feet. They didn't add any drainage. I mean, I don't know where liability lies there, but I know that there's other problems with Route 2 and the construction that's been done. If the town is already looking at that, please add this to the list. If not, what can we do to have the town look at this more seriously in
We do have a
partnership
list.
with
We'll
private?
add that to the list.
Okay. And then I think you already mentioned this, Josh, but you know, the brook acts like class 4 whitewater sometimes, and we need to figure out with the state, presumably Department of Natural Resources, how to manage that brook. What the culverts should look like, because they blew out in multiple places. Obviously, the worst failure was on O'Neill, but it's happening up and down that street, and clearly there's beaver dams that no one's breaking up when presumably they should be. So someone needs to look at that knows what they're doing, and hopefully the town can partner with us to make sure that gets done, you know, in an expeditious fashion. And then finally, you know, once that study is completed, what are we gonna do as a town to make sure that, you know, these 21 homeowners are safe? Because that's all we're asking for, really. Anything else?
Oh, sorry.
One
Tyler?
other, Tyler Mayshay, and one other quick thing too to bear in mind from a permitting standpoint. So as long, for things that exist in the flood hazard overlay district, you can maintain them. So meaning that without having to get a zoning permit or anything like that, for your particular instance, with having the culvert and bridge blown out, since it's pre-existing, was approved, you know, at some point by the state, in order to have that there, probably would have had a stream crossing permit. Provided, and I could try and look and see what it was originally approved for back when that subdivision went in. As long as it's built back to what was on the plan, what we have recorded on file for the plans. Now granted, I'm not saying that that's adequate for today's, you know, for future needs, but in terms of a short-term fix, you know, from the town's standpoint, from a permitting standpoint, I wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't necessarily need a permit to repair that, provided that it's built to the standards that was originally approved with that drive. So just bear that in mind.
Bart?
So one other thought, just thinking people may not be aware, we don't have engineers on staff in town government. I mean, this is something that goes, and it's why there's nothing nimble, like, oh, move the engineer from this project to that project. There is no engineer. We have an engineer in a contract for our stuff, but I'm back stuck to, if it's not our stuff, we're hard pressed to spend every other taxpayer's money on solving the problems of this taxpayer and the private road. But what we often do is go to regional planning commission. So it might be worth a conversation with the regional planning commission about this list and what their perspective is on it, because they actually do have engineers. They deal with combination of things, including roads and stormwater. And I haven't had any conversations with any of them since the flood, but that might be an option to say, look at some of these things down the road. I will say that a lot of the state folks at the Agency of Natural Resources, their first response is let the river and stream do what it wants to do. So you just got to start with, you're going uphill against that. That's their starting position.
Even when they put in a culvert that moves it.
Well, humor aside, you guys, I don't envy you the position you're in, but hopefully we can maybe come together as a town and get some money.
You wanted to say something?
Oh, are you done?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'm Alicia DeCoco. I was just going to say, for communication about getting resources to folks, it seems like Front Porch Forum is a primary mechanism, and I would just encourage the select board to consider mailing something out, a postcard or something, because while we all use that, not everybody does, and then pointing them maybe to a website or something that has, like, all of the stuff that you all just talked about is super helpful for the individual, and they might not know that they're supposed to be doing that, or that there are these resources available, and to get people to fill out the 2-on-1, like just a small postcard that won't cost too much money to send out.
One last thing on the stream alterations, Jones Mill Road, I don't know, what's the name of that brook there? Do you know?
Don't know the name of the brook.
The stream.
I know the road and the stream though.
Chris
Yeah.
Brunel, the stream alteration gentleman, sent an email to the town of Richmond that allowed them to clear out that brook when it got filled with sediment and the culvert got taken out for that road, and they allowed you to riprap and put the bank back without all kinds of permits. So contact those folks. They understand what's going on. They are not of the attitude of let the rivers go where they want to go and let the streams go where they want to go. They do not have that attitude when a major incident occurs like this. So reach out to them. They were great to work with.
So I will put this on the agenda for the August 5th meeting, and I will also add some of the ideas that we shared tonight. We'll put a working group together. You know, I'm not being crass when I say this. There will be another flooding event in Richmond. So we really need to learn from everybody's painful experiences and plan accordingly. Anybody else want to say anything before we move on?
And David, when you say putting this on the agenda, do you mean the specific issues that were brought up here on this slide?
Yeah, but warning them in such a fashion we could act on them.
Yeah, it'll be an action item on the
Yeah,
August 5th.
I just reshared the link to the Richmond Community Locals Facebook page for what it's worth, and that's another place I've seen a lot of people checking.
I will say there's like Kara could probably speak to this, but after a flood, there's a lot of leeway to repair the roads and stuff without seeking permits, hiring contractors as Richmond has done. And to just make things get back to usable condition, and the faster you do that, the less oversight there will be. So it's not saying that you should skirt the law, but there is a lot of leeway from the state to do that. So the sooner you act, the less oversight there will be in how you do it, because they know you're in a bind. Months from now, there will be more oversight, so.
It's very small consolation. that
Oversight
this
costs
board-
money.
It's a
too,
time
'cause-
limited window.
Yeah.
And I think the governor mentioned that in his press conference on Friday.
Yeah.
That waiving some of these for a very short term.
And
This board has waived permit fees in the past for flood events, recognizing that, hey, you shouldn't have to pay a fee to put back what was destroyed through no fault of your own.
Action item on your list for next,
Yep.
meeting, to set that waiver up for everybody in town who got hit by the flood. That'd be a great idea, David.
Tyler's got his, yeah.
Yeah, one last point, so this is from the definition, so for our flood hazard regulations, which start in section 6.8. The definition of maintenance in there, it does include and also includes maintenance of existing past recreation areas, stormwater drainage areas, roads, bridges, culverts, boardwalks, or channel management activities, so right there, that would put you squarely in the maintenance category in terms of fixing that road. So again, provided it's built to what it was originally approved at, or making progress towards that. I understand if it's temporarily, you guys can't get there, as long as it ultimately looks like what was there, unless you go to get a new permit to build a new road there, you can build that back in perpetuity, provided it's built to what it was originally approved to.
I doubt there's original plans. It's gonna have too much for you guys to go by, so fix it.
Yeah.
I'll put money on that one too.
Plus a little bit.
It's too old.
I'll take a
Okay.
look.
All right, thank you.
That's actually worth doing, Tyler, if you could, to take a look, because if that's what they'll be held to, it matters whether that record exists or not.
I'll see if I can find it.
They won't be held to it. They'll be better, I bet.
Next is consideration of making an appointment to the town's, no, it's not.
Nope.
Eagle Scout.
Pardon me while I get my glasses.
He David. David, money was the.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
all for coming.
So next is item C, consideration of approval of an Eagle Scout project to install a flag deposit box at the town center. And I see we have an Eagle Scout with us. Are you,
And he wishes to be,
he wishes to be,
he's not an Eagle Scout yet.
oh.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that's
Jay.
the goal. That's what I'm going for.
Okay.
Josh, do
Well, if
you
you're
have
ready,
my
the floor is
slides? I
yours.
tried to share them with you. I tried to get you permission, but I don't know if it worked.
You should be able to share screen.
Oh, I don't,
Were you
I don't
trying
have
to-
the ability to do that. I'm on my dad's account here. That's what I have to do to do things.
Share your-
It's not a big deal. It's mostly for
Oh, I
gathering.
got you.
thoughts
Hold
anyway.
up, hold up. I got you. I didn't know you were asking me to do that. I can do that though in a second. Just give me 20 seconds to find your presentation. Eagle presentation. There we go. All right, there you are, sir.
Excellent. Can I just tell you to advance when I'm ready for you to?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay. So my name's Michael Dennis. I'm a Life Scout from Troop 692 out of Williston. Some of you might remember me from the last time I was here to confirm your interest in this project. That was a while ago, though. Basically just, here you can advance to the next slide. As a 1,000-feet overview of what the project is going to be, my idea is to put a simple plywood box somewhere in the town for the collection of old, worn, or otherwise unusable American flags. because there's only a few organizations who have the ability to retire older flags, and the BSA happens to be one of them. And a lot of people I know don't have the ability or don't know how to get them taken care of otherwise. So I'm gonna just go over what my project's gonna look like, how I'm gonna get it done, and what you guys need from me. You can go to the next one too. So the first thing I want to talk about is the location. Somewhere in the town center, I think, would be pretty ideal. Either outside the library, or I think the little pavilion area outside the post office would be super ideal. I know that the post office is technically a federal building. I don't know if that applies to the space outside it or not, or what that would entail, or if you have any other ideas that you'd like to share with me, I can facilitate anything else you would like as well. But ultimately, where I put it is completely up to the select board's decision. You can advance. So the box itself is pretty simple. It's just a 3.5 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot box on legs to keep it off the ground. It's just going to be simple plywood with some more visually appealing siding on the outside. I'm going to do primer and paint to keep it weatherproof so it can be outside. My thoughts is to just do good simple red, but if select board input or the location we put it, something else would look better, that can totally change later. You can look at that Google drawing if you want, but it's pretty weak. It's just a basic idea. Just a box on legs, pretty much. And you can advance. The nitty gritty of the budget isn't super important to you guys. The biggest takeaway is that I don't need any money from the town or anything like that. Part of the requirement for the project is that I figure out funding and getting materials and all that all on my own. You can advance. And the other thing that I am totally responsible for is assembly. I don't need any help in figuring out labor. I have space to do it and everything. The only thing that I would need from you is to tell me when you want me to put it in. You guys can set me a target date. I'm thinking the end of August sometime to try and put it in. But other than that, I don't need anything from you there, and you can advance. As far as collecting the flags in the long term, I was thinking about reaching out to Troop 23, which is the Richmond troop, to see if they wanted to make a permanent arrangement. If not, then I can probably arrange something with my troop, Troop 692, to take care of that in the future. And if the town wants to handle that itself, then it can, but I don't think that'll be necessary. You can advance. And that's pretty much all I got, just a 1,000-foot overview. Any questions or requirements or comments you guys have?
Lisa?
First thing, yeah, how do people know it's gonna be a flag depository instead of just a box sitting on?
Great question. My troop is, one thing that my troop specifically does is the committee is gonna get me a plaque. And there's gonna be a big bronze plaque that says, put your flags here.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one, Josh, we have some boxes out front. Have we had any issues or concerns with the existing boxes? They're probably heavier, but.
Yeah,
Well-
they're locked.
Linda has complained that people have been putting town documents into the Sharps box and vice versa. I'm not actually kidding.
Yeah, that could be. People get confused on which box to use.
Yeah,
But
I
other
have,
than that, not heard many issues.
I have the ability to, if there's any kind of measures that you need me to take to prevent that kind of thing from happening, like there's one in Williston and similar things happen, things going in it that aren't supposed to. I can take measures in the design, like anchoring it or something else like that to
Yeah.
mitigate that. Or
Another,
putting a lock on it or something along those lines.
yeah, I mean, theft of the box could be an issue if it's a really nice looking box and somebody wants it and it's not anchored down. I'm not sure how much space there is with the windows and the current box setup. Another thought is we have the lobby on the second floor of the town center. There's already a prescription drug return box there. So if this is something that doesn't need 24/7 access, people can come in during business hours. It could be a great spot. Keep it inside, especially because it sounds like you're going to put a lot of work into the box and it would get less weathered inside.
That makes sense, yeah.
That's an excellent idea.
The other boxes there and hopefully less unwanted stuff would.
Hopefully no
show up.
prescription drugs end up in the flag box.
Or sharps.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent idea. If that's something that you guys like the sound of, I can adjust my plan to make that work totally.
Can it possibly be painted like a flag and have a clear display opening on the front so that you can see its flags inside it that are being dropped into it? So nobody's gonna wanna, you see flags in there, it says it's a flag drop box and it's painted like a flag. I mean, you wanna
Yeah,
put
I can make
needles
that
in it,
happen.
then you're purposely doing that.
I can make that happen. Yeah,
Just a recommendation.
sure.
I think it's a great idea for you guys to do this.
Yeah, I can do that.
Flag design, that's a good suggestion, I think.
Cool.
And I like the idea of a clear box so that people can clearly see, oh, there's flags in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, what'd I say? Well, anyway, clear front.
So Josh, do we just need to give him a thumbs up or do you want a
You
formal
could,
vote?
you
or-
could make a formal motion and give them the authority to move forward. I think he'd probably appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant Eagle Scout candidate Michael Dennis the go-ahead to construct and position a flag deposit box, preferably on the second floor of the town center.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Adam, second that?
Thank you, Adam. Motion made by Jay, seconded by Adam to give Michael permission to construct a flag recovery box at the town center.
Okay,
Colin,
thank you.
Hang on.
The only other thing I will need is
It's not
Mr.
over.
Arnes.
Michael, you're not
We're not
approved
there
yet. We have to have a vote. We're almost there.
Did you want to make another comment before we vote, Michael?
Oh, no, you guys go ahead. I just needed something
Okay,
extra from Mr. Arneson, but I can tell him that in a minute.
Mr. Arneson, you mean Josh?
That's what you prefer, yeah.
The Undertaker.
Okay, calling the motion to a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay, I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
Bard, aye.
And David, I. Michael, on behalf of the Richmond Select Board, I want to thank you for undertaking this project and bringing this before us tonight. I think I can speak for the board when I say items like this that come before us are much more pleasurable than other items that come before us. So thank you sincerely from all of us for this project. This is the kind of thing that we appreciate taking the time to consider.
Okay, thank you. Josh, you'll get an email from me in the near future about getting your signature. I need it for my preposition. Other than that, that's all I need from you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll take care of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay. So next we have consideration of making an appointment to the Town Center and Library Buildings Committee. Josh, did you want to speak to this?
And Mr. Stores is here.
Yeah.
I can speak to that too, or
You got it.
Kara and I are here. Mike was, Mike joined the committee, initially, right after the, failed bond vote, and he contributed a lot. He said that he voted against it, and he was proud to join the committee and explain why and help deal with the process going forward. I think he got a little frustrated with not having his voice heard in the direction, and, I think a couple members encouraged him to join another meeting as a member of the public to explain his thoughts. He'd already resigned. He thought that the committee had taken a little bit of a turn and we were doing, conducting ourselves in a way that he felt he could make his thoughts heard and contribute again. And so because he had already resigned, he's reapplying. So I think he was a very valuable member of the committee. I'm really glad that he's decided to reapply.
Josh, should we expect that he would fulfill the rest of his term? Or would this start over?
Oh, it would be, so I think the terms are,
I think they're indefinite.
they're
aren't they?
sort of undeclared, yeah, because it's supposed to
Like
be.
tenure.
Because initially, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was set up as a temporary committee. So I think that's why there were never term limits on it. So yeah, that's a good question, and there's no end to his term. It's lifetime.
I guess it'll be up to him then.
Can we specify that Mike's is for 20 years? He's the only person.
Mandatory, perhaps.
The best way to hold a seat is to be able to tell when your term is up yourself, so.
Should ask him if he wants to say anything.
So Adam, thank you for that glowing endorsement. Michael, did you want to say anything before we appoint you to this lifetime commitment?
No, I think I know how to get out of it if I need to.
Okay. So absent any further discussion, I would entertain a motion at this point to appoint Michael Storrs to the Town Center Library Buildings Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be pleased to make that motion to reappoint Michael Storrs to the Town Center Committee.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have a second?
Adam?
Thank you, Adam. Motion made by Lisa Miller, seconded by Adam Wood. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay, I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
Bard, aye.
And David, I. I'm sorry. I mean, congratulations, Mike. You're back on the, back
Thank
on
you.
the team.
Thanks for rejoining.
Thank you.
Okay. That's done. So moving on to E, discussion of a request to develop a town-owned strip of land off Mary Drive to rural road standards.
Oh, is Dan Pete here?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we have you make the request and then we can discuss.
We don't have anybody else joining us, right?
So yeah, I guess maybe I'll frame that to Mary's question earlier. So Danny Pete's here to have a request about a town-owned strip of land that accesses a few lots, that one of which he wants to develop. There is a complicating factor that the town owns this land, would need to be developed for what he's looking to do. So right now, the town sort of has three options. You could say, no, we're not gonna develop the land. You could say, yes, we'll allow Danny Pete to develop land at his own cost to develop and maintain. Or you could say, we will sell the land to Danny Pete. I think the town got it for $10, like 30 years ago. I do have a memo from the attorney that I just included in the email. So there is ability to go in executive session if you would like. You can discuss attorney-client communication. You can discuss a potential real estate negotiation because there could be a potential to sell the land. Or you could also go in to discuss negotiations of an agreement to allow for the development of the land. As with any executive session, it's at the board's discretion if you would like to do so. But we can discuss at least the request, some of the maybe questions you might have on that request. And if you'd like to enter executive session to discuss more details about a possible negotiation or real estate purchase or sale, then we can do so.
I just have a request.
Yeah.
Can we pull up the the boundary plot? Because I think that's,
That'll be helpful.
That would be helpful.
if you pull this, I saw this and was like, why are we selling land? And I pulled it up and saw what lot K is, and it really shaped my understanding of what we're talking about here.
Oh shoot, I was just sharing.
It is a driveway.
Lot K that is already a driveway shaped piece of land.
Yes,
So can I add,
yeah, please. I just
I'm
wanted to
Danny.
set that up a little bit.
Glad to meet you guys and Mrs. Miller. So Pete Farm up on Jericho Road. We've had a couple of subdivisions up there over the 30 years. So we're talking Mary Drive, which is a town road. And that was done 30 years ago. And that is when they established Lot K. And I guess they had good reason to have the town keep the ownership of Lot K. Then there's the Sadler Meadow that we did 10 years ago. Is the map up?
I think Sadler Meadows over this way, right?
Sadler Meadow is
Bottom left, kind of.
down here.
That was only 10 years ago?
It's been 10 years, 2012, 2013.
So, yeah, so just to orient people, this is actually on its side a little bit. So north is to the right. So this is Jericho Road and
Right.
up north. Sadler Meadow is here to the homes down here. That's a private road right now. Mary Drive is a public road to the cul-de-sac. And then the town owns this strip here, which accesses 4 lots, 3 of which are developed. This one is conserved, and this is the lot that Danny would like to develop.
Okay.
Does that orient everybody a bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Josh, is it the intention for the town to keep ownership of that road?
That's the question.
Guys.
Yeah.
I don't.
So K right now is deeded to the town as basically this strip of land. It's currently, I think, essentially like a 15-foot wide driveway,
It's a 60-foot wide.
60-foot, oh, it's a 60-foot wide strip, but on it is essentially a driveway, right?
Well, there's 3 homes on it now that use it for access. There's two
Well,
two
there's a
homes,
DRB
there's J,
thing that happened.
J and L, and then there's, you know, Mary Drive 450, which is, not shown there. So there's 3 homes that access and use K, and my lot 12 is the 4th home.
So are Connie Bennigan and Isaac
Yeah,
and Kathy, those are,
yeah,
they're
that,
right, are they,
yes, Connie Van Egan is lot L.
okay, and Isaac and Kathy are M or,
Ash and Kate Kreider. The other.
okay.
Bard?
So this seems anomalous to me, an anomaly, like lot
Yeah.
K owned by the town that functions as a driveway or road, but is not a road.
Maybe Tyler can
So,
add
yeah,
some
this is,
clarity to that.
this was, Ty again for the record, Tyler Masha, yeah. This took a lot of, it took a lot of digging around, so when Danny reached out to me about it, because we initially thought about it, as in most cases there, that this was a right of way. So when Danny first came to me, he's like, oh, you're talking about the right of way. No, the town actually owns
Wait, what?
this land, which I hadn't heard it. It took me a while to find the original subdivision for this because there's so many on there. But by the time I did, it referenced the deed language. We pulled the deed. I read it, Josh read it, Linda read it, Pete read it. It all seemed to indicate that we actually did own the land. Long story short, we got the attorney involved and come to find out that we do own it. So where this gets tricky is when the DRB approved this subdivision, the approval for lot 12 came for the original approval for Sadler Meadow. That's why it's noted as lot 12. And then the conserved land, lot 13, is the rest of Danny's farm. And Danny, feel free to correct me if I make any mistakes.
So Sadler Meadow was a 13 lot PUD that was developed with 11 lots actually with homes. And then lot 12 was land set aside. And that's the lot we're talking about. I want to build on it now.
Yeah.
It was set aside but not approved. The access was Mary Drive, K, and that's the right of way that I sold to my neighbor to the west and north. So that's the 3rd house on K right now it was in Westall property. Brad Worthen purchased a right of way. So then we go to lot 13. Lot 13 is the gray, and that's the farm, that's the rest of the farm. So that's the the 13 lot PUD. So
he purchased a right of way connecting from a town lot to his lot.
yes, and that was done back in 2000. That occurred.
Wait, Kara. Ask to be recognized.
Makes sense. Yeah, frontage.
Well, and so just getting back, so the DRB initially, when they approved this, they approved the subdivision, the residential, the PUD. With the caveat that lot 12 is approved as a lot, like it's a real lot, it exists. It's just not a building lot. Why? I couldn't tell you. But from that, and they also, I think, use that as a justification, because initially, typically when you have a private driveway that serves 4 houses, it automatically triggers something that's called a rural road standard, or has to be built to road specifications.
So what is currently
Just
for
the
my
driveway.
property, lot K, are there easements or anything for people to use it for access? It's just like,
There is a driveway that is on it, and the access to those lots is noted in that DRB decision. The DRB initially, when they wrote it, said that it had to be built to rural road specs, but only to the first driveway,
Right.
so which is like 50 feet.
Right.
Because
Right.
technically, it should have been built all the way up to where it splits, where lot 12 and
Right.
whereas 450 Mary Drive diverge, it should have been built to rural road all the way up to there.
Do you have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So in our memo, we were given essentially three options. One, do nothing. I don't see any real reason to do that. Two, retain ownership, but let Mr. Pete develop it, and we would have to put into place the legal easements to ensure the other landowners could get there. Or three, just give it to him, but
For $10.
for $10 or something. I'm not a land use specialist like, Adam is, but I don't see a lot of benefit to us keeping ownership of it. If it's basically,
I see a lot of drawbacks, to be honest.
yeah, I would be inclined to just say, you got $10, but we can't do that tonight. We're just basically needing to
property.
prepare. But that would be my inclination, is to say, let's deed it over. Let's follow that course of action to set up the legal framework so that we could deed it over and have it be yours. That's my 2 cents.
I have one question, just, why was the land conveyed, anyone have any idea why it was conveyed to the town initially and not treated as an easement, or what was the logic there?
How did the town come to own? Okay.
I mean, it was my mom's property and I didn't sit in on the meetings. My guess is they thought there was gonna be a major development of the whole farm eventually someday. So they were thinking it was gonna be a continuation of a town road. That's my only thought.
That's what it looks like.
Karen?
I think going back, just thinking about the time frame, we've got Greystone Drive, Southview sort of in that same time frame, and those were private developments that the road did get turned over to the town, as did Mary Drive. So Mary Drive was a
So
private development.
this is just the continuation of.
I think
kind
it,
of
I mean,
projecting
I'm
forward.
hypothesizing here, but I'm thinking about the time frame. Whereas now, we don't, a lot of towns aren't really in the practice of taking over private drives.
And it's worked to our significant disadvantage in the case of Greystone.
There's been challenges. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Carol?
Carol Bounty. My comments are, no, this is a developer sitting in front of you who would like to develop a building lot. That piece of property is worth a value more than $10.
30?
I'm not being funny about it. It cost me a lot of money to do engineering and to get things done when I developed property. That land was deeded to the town of Richmond as a payment or as an asset for future expansion of roads. We maintain Mary Drive right now.
Mary Drive, yeah.
Okay, it's a town road. The original goal of this layout and this plan, I think, was originally to connect into the Southview area, to have it connect into it. Just like you had Southview then connect to Hidden Pines.
Pines, right.
Okay, so it's talking about future planning. It's talking about looking at development. Richmond wants more development. I encourage more development. That's not what I'm saying here. But this is an asset that we own, that we don't get to give back to the development family when they gave it to us. It now has a value.
So I have a question, would you, excuse me, you think that we should give them access, but would you be a proponent of us maintaining ownership of it then, or would
We
you?
haven't really reviewed this that much, but we don't just give away our assets. If you are giving away assets, then I want some of your assets.
Can I say,
I want that asset and I'll sell it to them.
can I say something?
Well,
too?
Mr. Pete, go first.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think the plan was to go into Southview with this. The reason why Brad Worthen, the guy, the AB you see there, that was his property back in the day. He sold it, and then somebody else built. But he did not have access for that land off from, Southview because of how steep it is. So he came to me and said, I want to build up on that area where AB is. I need a right of way from you. And that's what I sold him, in the gray area and that dotted road there, this piece. So he came to me saying, I can't get up there. I need access from you. So I sold him a right of way for one home. So that right of way can only be used for one home, what comes off K and heads up towards lot 12.
Okay.
How much did you sell the right of way to him for?
Why did I?
No, how much?
Oh, how much? I think like 10,000, something like
Oh.
that.
So this was why I asked the question. There's a big difference between 10,000 and 10. And let's assume if you sold it to him for $10,000 to get access to one building lot, and you want access to one building lot, at some point in the past, that was construed by you to be worth $10,000, right?
The way I looked at it was he was building me an access to lot 12, because we were gonna build on it, my wife and I. And so,
But
you
you
know,
charged him $10,000.
Okay, Mr.
Jay?
Chairman, I think just based on the head nodding and so forth we saw earlier, that the select board appears to be in favor of pursuing the option of conveying the land to Mr. Pete and figuring out the price. We don't have to settle the price tonight. So my motion, I would like to move that the select board move, how do I say this? I move that we pursue the option of attempting to convey the land for whatever price and leave the rest to the attorneys and so forth for future review.
Can you hold off for a minute?
You can go ahead and second it and then we can still discuss it. We're
I'm not
not-
gonna
we're not- Okay, so no one wants a second, just pursuing that option? You don't have to agree with it, you can just let it be discussed.
Right. Yeah, I'll second it so we can discuss it.
Okay.
Adam, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of conditions that came from the DRB review
Mhm.
that I would say should be met before town takes any action on this.
Well, that's part of what the motion is asking us to do.
Okay.
Go forward with
Okay,
conditions.
Go forward and explore this option,
Well,
but
I
we're
just
not.
wanted to hear it specifically.
Yeah, I mean, the motion is to explore this option, have the attorneys get involved, do whatever legal, and then see where we wind up.
Carol?
Seems like a lot of money to spend right now before you guys discuss it a little bit more. I mean, our first
Yeah, I'm
instinct should not be go to lawyers unless we're making money and getting paid our legal fees. I mean, I'm not opposed to you guys doing something. I'm just saying,
We have three options: keep it, do nothing, or convey it for some fee. Those are our three options.
no, you could sell an easement.
I'm still talking, Kara. Option one, do nothing. Option two, keep ownership and work out a deal where it's developed and we maintain ownership. I have seen in the past that maintaining ownership or essentially taking ownership of what are essentially private roads is not tended to work out.
Well, they
And
have to be up to the town standards.
it's so long as it's up to town standards, but that's not a direction I tend to want to go. Or the third is come up with an equitable arrangement. However that winds up being done, we're not actually committing to going spending big attorney dollars at this point either. It's just, I'm saying, let's look at, of the three options, that would seem to be the preferable option over doing nothing or keeping it. We need to pick one of the three, or we can choose like we can always choose to do nothing and kick it down the road, but I don't know what's going to change down the road to make us then be able to make a decision unless we explore one of the options further. And moreover, if we explore one of the options further and we say, you know, that option isn't as good, we are not committed to that option. It's just, I'm saying that's the option I think we should look at.
I frankly support Danny, you're pursuing this. To me, it's just what's the right price and vehicle. And it's compelling to me that you sold an easement, not actual ownership of a right of access to a lot that could not otherwise be accessed for $10,000. That to me is a stake in the ground for what's the value of this piece of land without which you can't build on lot 12, right? I mean, you're similarly situated.
Well, lot 12, in my mind, was created back with Sadler Matta, knowing that the access was Mary Drive through K and then onto my farm.
But you don't have an easement or any legal basis for that, or do you?
I have a question.
There was nothing, it's written in the DRB decision that, you know, the access to lot 12 is this route. So, you know, the
Well, that's
mistakes,
their
if that was a
decision, but
mistake,
is that legally sound?
I mean, yeah, if the DRB writes a decision, that's what the law is allowed, that's what it's
Yeah, landlocked,
legally
right.
allowed to do.
Well,
We're
I'm not
quasi
sure
judicial
that's true,
body.
though. Like, can the DRB tell me what, like, can they just decide what's gonna happen in the parking lot here?
If you don't appeal it, yeah. They can issue decisions, any decision made by the board in error, whether they actually have the authority to do it or not, if it's not appealed and in an appropriate time period stands.
Right.
It's the same for my decision. If I make a mistake,
Okay, so if they've already said that you have the right to access, why are we talking about this?
because there's a caveat on there that prior to the development of lot 12, they had to come back to the development review board to get lot 12 established as a building lot. In order to get lot 12 established as a building lot, it needs to have access, basically kind of essentially reestablished. In order to have the access reestablished, it has to be built to the rural road specifications.
So
Now,
lot
it
12
kind of all starts to snowball into
lot
each
12
other.
has access, but the access that was constructed is not adequate to legally meet the requirements.
That is correct.
These are all great questions to bring up, and absolutely none of them conflict with the motion. The motion is to explore this option. I don't know why, unless we really want to be here till midnight tonight, why we're dragging this out. The motion is to explore the option in whatever fashion is suitable, and leaving it to the town manager and the planning staff to
No.
figure out the next step.
I fundamentally
Yeah, I kinda
disagree,
disagree with
because it's the fiduciary responsibility of the select board to say what's an acceptable
That's
value. or
not, that is not in conflict with my motion. I have not set a price. I said, let's explore this option.
And
How
then
is that
leave it
setting a
up to
price?
them. That's what the motion.
No,
said.
but it's exploring it. Then it would be brought back to us and we would then discuss it further. We can't come up with a
Okay.
price tonight. My motion is to explore an option. I am not in any way setting the price.
All right,
And come back to the board.
Yes,
Which option was it, Jay? I think that's what
option
the-
to explore conveying it to Mr. Pete and working out the arrangements, which would certainly include what we thought the appropriate price should be. That's all my motion was.
Thank you, Jay.
So not having Mr. Pete bring it up to town, rural road specs.
I'm saying
No.
explore that option.
Well, so in order to develop lot 12, he has to bring it up to our road specs.
The question is who owns it thereafter?
Right, or if it would be conveyed to him for a price, and he would then be responsible for bringing it up to the specs.
If I may, and I think this is where the real issue is that because we own the property, he can't apply
Right.
to do work on a property that he doesn't own. So he can't, this is where we kind of, how this whole thing started, we were trying to
Yeah.
figure out the chicken and egg is, do we come, because he's gonna need other things for
Do
which we
we
don't
as a
need to deal
town
with tonight.
File with the
Yeah.
DRB? Or do we
On
say,
behalf of these fellows.
and at the end of the day, if we sell it to him, we make more money than if we don't. So why would we not just say, let's explore the option where it gets sold and then work out the rest of the details?
and that he would then be responsible for building it to a rural road spec and access whatever lots.
That's
They need
exactly
roads,
right.
their lands,
That's
which
the
he'll be
motion.
It's a
responsible.
question of whether or not he's the only signature on the application, or if it's him,
Well-
if you or him or
Yeah.
both of you are.
In the instance where it's sold with easements that are baked into the sale for the existing lots that have access right now. To make sure that's all legally sound, and then, then it's Danny's application to the DRB, the select board doesn't get involved in the application process because then it's his road to develop.
But he would have to own it
He would
first.
have to own it first, so that's the quick thing, so I guess my question is, how do you want to figure out what the value is? Cause I don't really know how to figure that out, I could ask our
We could-
attorney, he might have some advice, but.
Or we can,
I don't know.
we could make,
I mean, I think-
approve the
give an
motion and
example. I think
then,
Bard kind
we-
of was the only.
we
Yeah,
can
but
approve the motion
how long
and
ago
then,
was that?
and then we
Like
can sleep on it and
$10,000
come back in
or-
2 weeks and see if we've figured out a price.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
just,
yeah.
or we
Well-
could be here till
And
midnight.
when was the easement sold? For 10,000, what year?
2007, I think.
Okay.
So my request tonight was, because I remember you asked me, what am I asking for?
Mhm.
And I chose not to, have it transferred to me. But, and then I said, whatever's cleanest.
Mhm.
So I didn't come here tonight thinking I was gonna have to pay for K. So, I'm not, why should I have to pay for lot K? I mean, it was something decided back in 30 years ago. It took land from us and thinking that it was gonna be, whatever is gonna happen to the farm, that was gonna be a major road to access the rest of the farm. That's not happening. This is the fourth lot on this K access. And so it has to go to railroad standard.
Mhm.
But the rest of the farm lot 13 is got agricultural restrictions on it. We can't develop it anymore. It's
Mhm.
also mitigated soils for Act 250. And then there's only one house, that can use that right away that I sold back in 2007. So the fourth house, there's going to be just four houses on this. And there's no future huge development that's going to happen. It's not possible. Unless that right away I sold to Brad Worthen back in the day, that owner comes back to me and says, will you change that right away to allow more homes in that AB area? But this is just, this is a 4 lot.
I agree with your intention, but what you just said, when he comes back, if they come back and ask for you to change that right away, you're gonna do that for free?
I won't do it. I
So I mean, that's like kind of, I know it was conveyed for like $10 or whatever, two single digits. But they're asking us to change it, so in the, like as Jay, or sorry, as Bard said in the previous thing, we kind of have to look up for the town's best interest, so not owning it is in our best interest. And conveying it for $10 is not in our best interest. And while it might not be in your best interest for us to negotiate a price, it is kind of in the town's best interest.
Gary?
Yeah, so I have a question, but also, I mean, the intent that they took that land as part of the development was for them to access that, so I don't understand why you wanna collect money for something that was the intent that they gave up that land. To me, you should just give him the right to do that. And my second thing is a question. The rural road standards kick in at more than 3, but
Right.
my understanding was you don't have to build the whole road to that. You just have to build to where you get it down to 3. So you only have to build to the first driveway.
Right.
Well, that is not entirely the case. So you actually have to build it up to where it stops serving, where it doesn't
Right.
serve all of them. So basically, a good example of this would be Hillview. Like when you guys were looking at Hillview, right, there was that's where that hammerhead turnaround is. The hammerhead turnaround is the end. In some cases, a hammerhead cul-de-sac, whatever it is, that is the end of where the road starts, and then the driveways continue on from there.
Yeah.
Let's say for the sake of argument, right? You couldn't actually do this, but thought experiment. If you took lot 12 and then put 4 other lots up there, you couldn't actually do that, but in this argument, you could. You would then have to extend what was a driveway serving lot 2 would then have to become a road because it's serving multiple structures. So right now, initially, when the board approved it, it probably should have been approved to go all the way up. It wasn't. I can't say why. That just wasn't what they did. Now what you're coming back to was that, and this is, again, not a topic of conversation for tonight, but it is going to be a future topic, as because of the other extenuating circumstances like the Act 250 mitigation and stuff like that, there may be prohibitions on actually widening that driveway out enough to meet those standards. So some waiver of it would have to be approved probably at some point. That's not a topic for tonight, but that's ultimately where we would go. The problem is getting the vehicle to get us there, which is what the conversation's about.
Well, so if I can summarize, I think, Danny, your point and your point, Gary, is look, at least by the map, the apparent intent of K was to provide a public road access to something which was at that time undetermined.
Mhm.
Well, also to lot 12.
Right.
Here, you can sit here.
My comment was just the sale of it for $10 wasn't an acceptable number. If he's just looking to upgrade the road, he wants to upgrade the road at his expense, then what happens is the town is going to assume the maintenance of the road, which is the cost that Jay's talking about for down the road. So if the town, I don't know if the town can go into, and this is a legal thing that Jay would want you to look at, is if the town could go into an illegal agreement that the maintenance of the road stays with them, and I think it's gonna be a nightmare, that the maintenance of the road stays with the people versus the town selling the land back to the Pete's to develop. But my question is, the two lots that are already on it with driveways,
We'd have to bake the easements in.
do they have the ability to subdivide? What are the size of the lots and what's the zoning in the area? If they have the ability to subdivide and you then sell the right of way to them and it only allows them one easement, you are hindering development in a high density area that you wanted it developed is all, I'm trying to think through all of the different moving
No, you're right.
parts. So I want him to be able to do something, but you guys do have to, and I agree with you guys, you have to look at the bigger picture to see, can other lots subdivide? Will you be hindering their future development by selling the existing road? Because we're gonna call it an undeveloped road. I don't know if it's a class 3. I don't know what you're calling it, class 4. It's some kind of class of road, or is it just a piece of land that the town owns? And that's what's key. Does the rural road specs kick in for the town, or is it a private developer that it kicks in for? Is there a different road specs when it's a public town road?
We're asking for starting off the cul-de-sac, which would include K, to have it a private rural road. So we would,
So you would assume
we
all
would pay
maintenance
that.
under- yeah.
We would pay that. And, you know, those are mound systems, J and L. So, you know, I doubt if there's any septic
Well, yeah.
capability.
Not a lot of space, yeah.
Minimum lot size up there too, because it's not served by water and sewer is an acre.
Yeah, it's an acre.
So technically, any lot that has more than that, from the town's perspective, could be further subdivided. However, to Danny's point, if that's not to say there aren't covenants or protections on the land that would prohibit further subdivision. Again,
Further
that's a
sub-
civil
just
matter at
design
that point,
constraints.
but from a zoning standpoint, you just need an acre. That's-
And if those mounds were designed prior to 2008 and they have replacement areas, those replacement areas can be used for mound systems, so they can be subdivided because they would have septic. So the facts are, you gotta watch the neighboring properties' legal rights that you potentially would be taking away if you sell that land to him. But the private road issue versus a public road, can the town have a quote private road if it's truly public lands?
Private road on public land, yeah.
So, I mean, according to initial conversations with our attorney, he thought that it could be structured where the town retains it and Danny Pete pays to improve it and then has a maintenance agreement that it's his responsibility in perpetuity. I agree with you, it's a little messy, and then, you know, 30 years from now, it floods out and there's questions about.
Does FEMA cover it, right?
Funny vote.
Oh, that's- yeah, so it's FEMA coming. Yeah, it's a good question.
Let's circle back, because we could discuss this all night.
Yeah.
The preference was for the cleanest option.
Yeah.
I think the cleanest option is we explore conveying it for whatever price. That's my motion.
And coming back at what point? Coming back to the board?
When because there's a number of questions
Okay.
that rattled off tonight.
It's to explore that and then we'll discuss it and entertain it, and at which point we could accept or reject whatever.
Correct.
So just for clarity, could you restate the motion, then we'll vote
My
on
mo-
it?
My motion is to explore the option of conveying ownership of the land to Mr. Pete and working out the details to be brought back to us.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm. Yep.
So just back to the discussion real quick. So all these issues that we talked about with L and J and A, B and lot 12, all the stuff for access with single accesses versus future subdivisions could be addressed
Mhm.
when we convey it.
Mhm.
We could.
Should be addressed.
We could, or should be, with the landowner's input where it can be conveyed. However, J and L are not limited to a single access, et cetera, so that their access isn't.
Right, we paid this guy here a salary to work out details like this.
Yeah, okay, just want to click, yeah, so I think that's a reasonable.
Yeah, and I think we should also, one of the questions about the price, to Kara's point, is how much is this gonna cost us in legal fees to convey the land?
I think that's my big concern. It's not making money to hit the
not losing
general
money.
fund or anything. It's
Cover.
just
Yeah, not
to-
losing money would.
It's not to pay money out of the town.
But it's gonna, I mean, just to sell it, there's gonna be deed research, easements that need to be drawn up, agreements back and forth with
Yeah.
landowners who will have an easement. there's gonna be some
Not
legal
gonna be cheap.
expense. We need to at least get covered for that, I would think.
And then,
Well, and it's an asset that has a value to
Well,
many
that-
developers,
that-
so you cannot lose that value either.
so. I know it's the cleanest, but it seems like the simplest would be to just be a co-signatory on the.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you guys.
Yeah.
But even,
The easiest, most straightforward at the moment, probably not in the future, but hopefully, I won't be in the select board then. It's to just co-sign the application to rebuild the road and then be done with it. And not convey
even
anything.
that,
I won't vote for that option.
there'd still be some legal fees associated with that, I'm sure. And I think it does.
And it's pretty complicated long-term.
I
we
think
don't care about
long term, it would raise a lot of questions.
Your road just flooded, fix it.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, it is ultimately is still gonna have to go to the development review
Right.
board, so again, this is, if you did sign it, the board could turn around and say, you know, this doesn't comply based on X,
Yeah.
Y, or Z.
Okay.
Or, and if it doesn't, but this is the whether or not you guys want to, because you own it, because in theory, you could sign the application today if you wanted to, in theory, and then it goes off to the DRB and then on from there. Again, doesn't change the fact that you still own the land. But the end result is if you sell it to him, you can kind of wash your hands of it to a certain extent, and then it's just, you know, Danny's not having to get you guys to sign on to stuff. He owns it. It's his project, goes to the DRB. Whatever we need to come back to for you guys, we will kind of have to come back. You know, there's gonna be some processes that you guys are gonna have to approve parts of it anyways, so.
Seems like the cleanest long-term.
Yep, so
I
for,
support Jay's motion with the caveat of J and L retaining rights for future subdivision if that occurs, along with Bard's comment of it has a value. I support Jay's motion.
Are we ready to call the motion to a vote? I think we are. Please
Okay.
identify yourself and signify your vote.
J.I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
David, I.
Yay.
Well, it
Just-
moves further down the road, so to
Mhm.
speak,
But now Tyler has some direction.
So
so
that's
just a couple
boomerang
questions
vote.
I
We
have.
took it, but it's coming back.
In my request, to call it Mary Drive Extension, that's down the road now. And then a waiver on the railroad, from lot K's boundary with lot 13.
Mhm.
That right of way of mine, which is in restricted area, to not have to build that through a road. Cause you can't, it's restricted, can't construct or develop, you know, so I can't construct on that section.
Mhm.
So,
to meet
I'm-
the standards, you mean you have an obstacle based on the conservation and the.
right,
easement.
so I'm asking to do rural road to the end of K, where
Right.
it bounds 13.
Yeah.
And that's where I stopped the rural road,
So where this, and again, not trying to bog you guys
and that
down
can
with
be
this-
put down the road.
with you down with this tonight. So how this typically works, and this is how this probably, again, I don't, should have happened in the future, is that both the DRB and the select board have to approve waivers
Mhm.
to the rural road specifications.
Mhm.
So one of you, neither one of you can do it without the other.
Mhm.
Thankfully, it's a rural road and not a public works spec, because while our public works specs reference waivers, we don't have the waiver section currently in it. It's a work in progress at the moment, but this does give you the vehicle right now to do it. However, it's gotta go, I think, and this is what the conversation Josh and I were having is, does it make more sense for you guys to look at his plans and approve the waiver with whatever conditions you wanna put on it, then have it go to the board, and then the board says, do you like this? Do you wanna put conditions on it? Do you wanna change it? Because if it goes to you first, you approve it. It goes to the DRB doesn't wanna approve it, then we're just dealing with the standards, it doesn't have to come back, but if the board approves it, comes to you guys, you wanna change something on it, he's gotta go back to DRB to modify it again to reflect what it's actually going to be built to.
Typically, these applications will go to the DRB for review.
That's
The
true.
DRB will take a look at everything make recommendations, make waivers, and then it comes to the select board for the final approval because DRB are our experts, or they are the town's experts in reviewing these and making suggestions on should a waiver be in place or not. That kind of takes the burden off of the board of having, of select board, of having to look in detail at the plans, because the DRB has done that and sort of presented it to you in a little bit more of a plan.
Makes sense.
Okay, one more comment from, I think, you know, I'm not sure, again, I'm putting myself back 30 years ago on the planning commissioner DRB and why they would want to keep K as for the town of Richmond or ownership of it. I just think they thought this whole farm was going to be developed you know, we did develop it with Sadler Meadow on the south end.
Yeah.
But the rest of the farm is going to stay in perpetuity, you know, open land and hay land and grazing land. So, you know, so 30 years later, K is going to be an access to 4 homes. So, you know, I think, you know, I'm willing to pay for the cleanup here, but I don't see why I would have to pay for, like a right-of-way cost. That it doesn't make sense to me for us to, pay that amount for, cleaning up, something that, was occurred 30 years ago. I mean, K was used to access our farm for future development. And, you know, so we gave land then off the farm to do that, thinking that maybe we would develop the whole farm and that would be a great access. But now, today, it's serving 4 homes. It could serve more if J and L were ever subdivided. But if that occurs, then that road gets updated even more, you know, more money's put in the K area to put those houses in.
Could AB ever be subdivided?
Not using this access, because that right of way only allows 1 home, like I said
And
before.
that's hard baked into the conservation easement?
It's hard baked into our right of way deed, or if you look at the language in that right of way, it only allows 1 home.
That's mutable, isn't it? Changeable?
It is.
Be between Mr. Pete
So-
and Mr. Worthen.
But that's my point, that it could be subdivided at a future state, at which point
Not for
you
free.
would be negotiating with that owner. If you want to subdivide, you got to come back to me and adjust that
Right,
way.
but 13 is tied up in the Act 250 permit, Sadler Meadow Act 250. It's mitigates,
Land, you mean.
it's mitigates the whole farm, the 71 acre, and then across the road. It's mitigated soils for developing on Primac soils, the Sadler Meadow. And then it's agriculture use only.
So, right, I'm really looking at A and B and 12. Like, could
Yeah,
those
A
be
and B is
subdivided?
my property. It's, back when that was sold, when I sold that right away. He's using septic from a major leach field used by Brad Worthen Extension or whatever. But I think that the laws have changed where they could put more homes in that AB area now, but the access would have to be Mary Drive through K, because you can't, there's not good access off from Southview up into that area.
So it would strike me, and I'm sorry, I keep flogging this, that between Mary Drive K, one of the things, if we don't want K to stand in the way of future development, we don't want your one, like, home right of way to stand in the way of future development either, do we?
Well, actually, we can't build on lot 13. We can't construct
I'm
on it.
not talking about 13. I'm talking 12 and AB.
Well, I think 13 is AB, is that what you're?
No, it's above the line.
Oh, 13's here, sorry.
Well, to get to 12 in AB, you gotta go through 13,
Yes,
right?
on the road that already exists.
Right,
With a current right-of-way restriction for 1 home.
Right.
Which is arbitrary, is it not? You could be 2, it could be 3.
But I think you can't expand, you can't develop this swath here.
Yeah,
the
you
rural
can't,
road
you
standards
can't,
Because of the
build it bigger.
conservation
right,
easement on
that's what I'm
13.
trying to say.
Legally, there's nothing stopping them from selling that, and then requesting a waiver to that and putting
It could go
projects
to
up there.
Great.
Reed says a driveway, okay. But then, so one,
it's now
one,
two.
one more lot.
Somebody could subdivide, is part of my point.
Right.
And part of my point, Danny, and I'm accusing you of anything, but so we have K with no restrictions, then AB wants to subdivide from 1 to 2. What does he have to pay it to get to change that right away?
I don't think we can because of the restriction on lot 13. Which is you can't construct, you can't develop. It's mitigated soil, it's agriculture use only.
Well, could you explain that to me? Because it doesn't make sense to me.
You
So,
read,
I am not an expert on.
yeah, read the
250.
permits, it's in the
own
permits.
I'm
separate-
not gonna read the permits, honestly.
It's its own state process, as far as the rural road specifications, again, they only required it to there, and it's important to remember, anytime you're dealing with Act 250, it's a siloed process.
Right.
Right? Just because you get an Act 250 permit does not mean you have local approval to build.
Yeah.
And vice versa. They don't talk to each other at all, much to the detriment of applicants in some cases. A good case in point of this was the mobile station had to come back to the DRB to amend their site plan because Act 250 required them to put plantings in a particular area in order to satisfy their Act 250 permit. That triggered them to come back to the DRB because any changes to landscaping for conditional use projects requires site plan approval by the DRB. So again, from the town's perspective, there wouldn't necessarily be any prohibition on him building that out to a rural road standard all the way out there. The problem is Act 250 permit won't let him do it.
I'm not even talking about that.
But what would have
He's
to
got,
be done?
there's currently a driveway
That is
Right.
correct.
that serves one house.
That is, well, it serves technically both of those lots, but
Right.
yes.
And
There's 3 houses.
Because you can't have a landlocked parcel, so it is accessed by. that
So if
drive.
AB was subdivided, what would have to be done to that leg that's in the shaded area to accommodate an additional dwelling?
nothing, right?
In theory, it depends on, again, how far up it, in theory, right, it should have been. Forget his request for the waiver.
Yeah.
Right? If it was built how it technically should be, which is it goes all the way up to where lot 12 and 450 intersect, right?
Mhm.
Provided that AB's driveway only serves 3 or fewer homes, it's a driveway. The minute it serves 4,
Right.
it becomes.
It's
a
now
rural
serving
road.
2.
So it could, he
Well,
could,
it
he
serves-
could add a minimum of one more before he
Serves
had to meet.
one right now.
Well, it's lot.
One
it's
home and
lots,
2
so-
lots.
Homes are what count to trigger the 4. That's
So-
4 homes, not 4 lots.
So AB could have subdivided
There's-
once.
There's room for 12 and one more before we have to meet the standards.
So
there's
AB could-
inherent value in this that.
So
The
AB
only thing
gets one.
restricting another home is your right of way. It's nothing to do with lot 13. It's just that your right of way says 1 home. The road standard doesn't have to change to serve up to 3 homes. And where I'm going is you have a pending economic advantage over lot AB. If you want to subdivide, build a second home there, you got to come back to me. You don't have to change anything with the town. It's built to the correct specs as a driveway. You just got to pay me more money to get a right of way to 2 homes versus 1, is how it looks from where I sit.
So it's just changing.
Well, to be clear, it should have been built, again, the waiver aside, it should have been built to rural road all the way out there, technically.
Yeah, but where it stands right now, I think Bart is correct.
Karen?
The only comment I want to say is the land was originally
You can see
given
that's
to the
like-
town for a reason. And it was part of the Murray Drive development and the Pinnacle View development. It was not given to the town to give back for when you want to divide up the rest of your land, whether this is conserved or not conserved. So the value is an asset for the town of Richmond. I'm not going to beat on this anymore. The developer already gave up that asset to get all the rest of the developing that they wanted done on Murray Drive and Pinnacle View. So as long as you get a value for that land, because land, there's not a property in this whole country, the land doesn't have a value. The town has a value in that land is all I'm saying. Whether you just sell it to him and he develops 12, he sells it to AB, I don't care, but it has a value.
So we're gonna explore that part of the.
Yep.
motion.
Yeah.
I'm willing to pay for the lawyer fees. I don't wanna screw the town. So, but when you're talking about like $10,000, I have a problem with that.
Okay, what if we put in a part of the agreement that says, if anybody subdivides, you aren't gonna charge them any more to change the right of way agreement through lot 13?
I don't see a reason for me to wanna change that right away language.
Well, what if AB wants to subdivide into two?
I'm just
lots?
saying, I would not, I don't have a reason that I would wanna change just the one house on that right away I sold to AB. I don't have a reason to do that.
Yeah, you don't want him to build more than one house.
I don't, but I know whoever wants to subdivide AB more has got to come to you, to DRB and figure all this out. And so, that's a hurdle when he's only got access for just one house.
But my point is he could have access to two if you change the right of way. If we,
Right. Yep.
Please make it so no easements can be sold for.
These are all things that we could.
Yeah, I think these are
Yeah,
all
we
things
gotta
can
move
hash out
on.
later. I don't think we're gonna do it, so.
I thank you for your time.
Hey,
Yeah,
Tom,
thank you.
This, we're cleaning up a mess,
yeah.
in my
Mary-
opinion.
Mary
Cleaning up a
Drive,
mess.
Yeah, and I will say that, when our attorney looked at it, Keith was convinced that there was no way that we actually own this land, that it was right of way.
Well,
We
it
were
was,
just-
some of the language you
that it
read,
was.
it talks about a right of way, but it isn't a right of way.
It's what's weird is
it serves
there's
as one,
two
but it's three
things
different
actually
things.
in the deed. There's Mary Drive, and then there's this lot K that comes off of it. And Dave, the attorney was like, I think he'd only could recall one other time where you've seen something like this, and none of us can really figure out why it happened,
But it happened.
but it happened for whatever reason.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to F, consideration of asking the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission and VTrans to conduct a traffic safety audit at Fays Corners.
Mr. Chairman, I see very little downside to doing this, given the obvious present
Yeah, I know.
issues.
Good morning. And thanks for the
There are a lot of issues at Fays Corners that not many people are aware of. The way Heinsberg Road turns obviously is unsafe. There's a site issue. But that little concrete bridge that it crosses, that's the most structurally deficient bridge in the town of Richmond. That will have to be replaced soon. Also, as we saw again last week, that area floods. There's a flooding problem. So a proper solution to Fays Corners would involve moving Heinsberg Road, replacing the bridge, mitigating flood, re-engineering the intersection off of
It's
Kenyon
THBC times 3 or 4.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's a big mess that needs a big fix.
So to be clear, the audit would sort of do what they can with the existing geometry of the intersection. A UPWP study is more of what we did with THPC, where it was more public outreach, looking at what could be done with geometry, realignment, stop signs. So the audit is kind of some quick fixes.
Yeah.
And then but then that's free through our already dues, well, free, paid for with our dues to CRPC. Additional fees to do a further study. So tonight, the question is, do we want to at least get the audit and see what they say?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we pursue asking CCRPC for the road safety audit and consider applying for the scoping study at a later date.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Kara?
Having grown up, have that on that intersect, basically having to go through that intersection.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, the town realigned that intersection since I was learning to drive. But my question for you is, the recent home that got ran into by a vehicle,
That corner, yeah.
that lot might be a good purchase for the town of Richmond to realign and make a better improved intersection there. And since the house, on my understanding, is totaled,
Mhm.
and there's questions of whether the driver had insurance and all of those kinds of insurance things,
And I think they're in the process of moving out of it when that happens.
Yeah.
So,
So my question to the town is, should we not consider, because if that person is not going to be able to even sell the home for a reasonable amount, and we've been taxing that property on our tax rolls for a grand list value, would it not possibly be in the best interest of the town of Richmond to consider purchasing that property through a grant, through CCRPC or whomever or wherever, or whatever, funding to potentially mitigate that intersection issue?
It's a thought, maybe the roads audit would bring that out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have to plant that seed with the road audit. I don't know where that, I think you might want to start that discussion with the property owner sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's a good
or
point.
something irreversible happens, yeah, outside of our.
Right, before somebody wants to demolish the house and build a whole new house on that intersection, then you'll have to buy the house for even more than what it's worth right now.
Much.
And it's what it's worth prior to the accident,
Yeah.
is what I would say. That's just an idea that I
That's a good
wanted to
idea.
put out there for you guys to consider.
Any further discussion? Calling the motion to a vote.
Jay, I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
Word aye.
David, I.
Does anybody reach out to the homeowner, or are you just gonna let that one drop?
So I think we should do both. See that, put it on the table for CCRPC. Is this something that would like factor into it? And it seems prudent to engage in a conversation.
Yeah.
If they say, yeah, I'll sell it to you for $5 million, well, that's not gonna go.
Right.
Yeah.
But it might be helping them too.
Yeah.
There might be a.
Win-win.
Mutually beneficial agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who's gonna reach out to the homeowner?
Comes in handy.
Who wants to? Is it actually for sale right now?
I don't believe so.
I think they'd listen, but I don't think.
But
they
you
think-
live down there. Do you know the guy?
Not directly, but.
Okay.
I don't think
You want
that
me
I
to
live
go-
in there.
If you want me to go ask, I will.
Check the deed.
I mean, I got a call from a relative of theirs last week, 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
I can call them back and see what their plans are.
I don't think
Yeah.
there's anyone in the house.
I'm not gonna
going on.
negotiate with them.
No,
but
I would hope
Yeah,
not.
it's,
Would you be open to selling it?
Oh, it could be.
would be open
Red light,
to a
yellow light,
discussion.
green light.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, I'll call them.
And that's it. And then if it's green or yellow, we can bring it back and say, what
Thank
would
you,
it take?
Josh. Thank you for doing that.
Yep.
Thanks for bringing it up. Because that would be the perfect solution. to
Yeah, it would.
Realign Canyon. It's a great idea.
Update on the Bridge Street corridor safety traffic calming safety measures.
Yay.
So I gave Pete a list that came out of the Bridge Street study, or the conversation 2 weeks ago. He was in the office for 2 days before he was out for 4th of July, and then presumably out all of last week until a little rainstorm brought him back into town on Thursday. I think they actually got a couple of stop bars painted.
They did.
Before the flood started. But at this point, it's a bit on hold as he
Not the
goes to
priority.
address major washouts.
I think they should stay on the list and they go on sort of the back burner.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
obviously there are things on the front burner.
Yeah.
Consideration of approval of an agreement with VTrans for a parking area near the intersection of Route 2 and Johnny Brook Road. So this is the recreational parking area next to the Checker House Bridge.
Yep, I'll bring it up here. Because sometimes a map is.
And this
better.
is just
Like a
basically
lot-
to make it
a lot on
longer.
us and not a lot on the state. It's just,
Well-
we're responsible for everything.
So so Lisa, we used to be, let me give you a little history. Just because we used to be responsible for a lot more their first pass at this.
Wow.
So this is a lot here, Johnny Brook Road, kind of comes down into Canyon. So we were at Fays Corners a few minutes ago, now we're at the other end of Canyon, with Route 2 and the bridge over here. So I think it's for the past 3 years now, we've had what they call an 1111 permit with the state, which is a year-to-year permit we had to renew every year for parking in this sort of striped area here.
Very well done, Josh.
I think that was actually Attorney Joe McLean who actually drew that portion in there. So anyway, the green dotted line here is a swale. So that is a stormwater drainage. So we're not allowed to park there. We're allowed to sort of park around that. It is quite heavily used. There's some good mountain biking on the other end, Johnny Brook Road, so it's used quite well. So after doing this for 3 years, the state came back and said, hey, we'd like to do a 5-year agreement with the town. And the traffic committee said, yeah, sure, let's do that. Their first draft of this basically put all of the stormwater maintenance and permitting on the town.
Yeah, no.
I said, no, we're not doing that. So where we're at now is if the town or the parking in that area, so if the parking in the area or the town by maintaining that area damage this swale, then it's the town's to repair. But if a giant flood comes through and something blows out in the swale, but it's not,
That would have.
not our problem, or something like a tractor trailer comes off of Route 2 and
Okay.
smashes into the swale and damages it, that is not our problem. The way they had this initially written, that would have been our problem. So I brought it back to the board just to make sure that you're comfortable with the way it's written now. I'm comfortable with it. Our attorney was involved in helping to kind of go back and forth with their attorney on it. And if this works for the board, we'll have a 5-year agreement.
Yeah, I've got doubts both ways. I mean, we need parking down there. for
Yeah.
sure. Right now, people are gonna park anyway, and it's all over the place,
Yeah.
so it just makes sense. But we're responsible for hauling away any car that breaks down or
Right.
pollution from cars or whatever. I think.
We're the one that's asking them to park there, otherwise they wouldn't have
Yeah,
parking
well,
there.
good point.
It's solving a
Everybody
town
knows.
problem with the recreational parking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Might
think,
be
I
the
think
lesson
that's
too, we-
reasonable. Like, we would have to do that in Volunteers Green,
Mm.
you know, if they had to tow a car or something like that. So,
Carol?
I was on the parking, I was the chair of a parking advisory committee when we created this parking lot with the state. So I don't think it's being used this year at all because you don't
Because
have the
we don't have the
agreement,
agreement.
right?
yeah.
Strongly recommend you go into this agreement with the state. Thank you for fixing that situation where they wanted us to repair everything. I think the biggest responsibility we have that Pete took very seriously in the very beginning was roping off the appropriate places to park. And people observed that they were really good about that. And it got them off of Johnny Brook Road, because right now they're parking on Johnny Brook Road and it's very limiting where they can park. So I strongly recommend you move forward with this. Thank you for fixing that. It was very successful from the minute we started it to not being used this year. As far as having a car towed, we don't pay the car being towed. The person coming to get their car pays the car being towed. So we don't, it's not a fee on us, but thank you for bringing that up, Lisa, but I strongly recommend you
I'm
guys
just thinking
moving
of that one
forward
sitting in
with
the
it.
parking lot, that Mini Cooper that's right up to here in the water.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. well,
Not our response, it's not our
Mazda
responsibility.
next to it.
Just out of curiosity, about how many parking spots are there? I've driven
Well,
by and seen cars, but I don't know how many. cents of that.
Originally, I think there was like 20.
Yeah, 'cause
And then it got
originally we-
cut down by the swale because even the state didn't really know they had a swale there to begin with.
Right.
So the first year there was more parking than year number 2.
It's like 10 or more.
Oh, no, but I think
15,
if it's
yeah.
parked right, you can get, yeah. Yeah,
And then is
and
there
it's
anything we need to,
also,
like,
and it also has a little picnicky area down. I mean, it goes down to like the river and it's really a nice view right there. It's a lovely place, a lovely spot.
No, there's nothing to improve it. All we would need to do at this point is brush hog it because it's pretty high,
And
the grass, and put up the ropes.
the
Yeah.
ropes up.
And there might be, traffic committee wanted to put up, or sorry, park committee was thinking some 4x4 posts. Right now, I think it's grade stakes, but they want to do something a little more sturdy.
For Vermonti split rail or something like that.
Right.
No
Gary?
trail, no flooding.
Gary's gonna build our split
Gary's
rail
gonna build-
fence. I just volunteered to build a fence. Don't worry about it.
No split rail.
No, no, actually, we can't build anything that's gonna impede traffic.
Perfect.
So
Even
I
better.
think 4x4s, grade stakes, and we'll get it up. It'll be
Well,
fine.
you
So
can't
the
do-
idea of the multi-level parking deck.
That's.
No. You can't do the 4x4s in the swale area because you're disrupting the stone and stuff like that.
Right,
I don't-
out,
You can only do the
Perimeter.
little stakes that you do in that area, but you mean the entrance to the parking area could be 4x4s because it's on the town, right of way area.
yeah.
So can we have a
One
motion?
way it'll be delineated.
Seems like a win-win.
Yeah.
Ready for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, in the matter of the, I lost my place,
316.
I don't have numbers on here. The VTrans parking area, the town taking it over or having an agreement with VTrans, move that we move forward with that. Approve it.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have a second?
Bart, I'll second it.
Thank you, Bard. So the motion moved by Lisa Miller, seconded by Bard Hill, is to move to approve the agreement with VTrans for public parking at the Checker House, Johnny Brook Road area. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay, I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I. Next is a follow-up on an ad hoc committee to explore funding options for the recreation path from the village to Riverview Commons. Hi, Gary.
Full committee member, I'll join you.
So just to preface, I did put out, I think it ended up being one and then, well, essentially two calls on Front Porch Forum for committee members for this committee as well as for the traffic committee. Got no responses yet. Of course, right when I did that, we had a flood, so people were maybe a little distracted, so maybe not the best time to be putting it out, but we did some outreach. I don't know if Gary's heard from anybody either.
I had a short list of people I was gonna contact, but then when I saw your Front Porch Forum thing, I thought, well, I don't wanna ask them until we'll see what kind of response you got. So I will reach out and I think I can find some committee members. One thing I wondered about is, so we talked about a 5-person committee last time. And say we only get 3 members, do I have a quorum issue if 2 members show up of the 3 but the committee is set up as a 5-member
You
committee?
would have issues, yes.
So
We can
change-
modify that to be 3.
Yeah, okay,
Size of the committee.
okay, right.
We can modify it to be 1, in which case you'd have to be present to have one.
But if you weren't present, no one would be annoyed that you didn't have a quorum, so.
You know,
Argue with yourself.
Yeah, and you couldn't discuss it at home by yourself without warning that. It's a public meeting.
So there is, essentially, there's no committee until I find at least one other person.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, back in the age of sail, when you didn't have enough members for your crew, you would just Shanghai them from waterfront bars. Is that not an option anymore?
We only have Papa McKee's, so.
There's, no, there's.
That'd be the
plenty
place
of
to
bars.
go.
No, there's plenty of bars. You gotta count Hatchet, you gotta count Stone Corral, come on now.
Big Spruce,
5 different places.
Stone's Throw.
Any of that. having
Liquor
fruit
license
field.
is actually the next agenda item if we'd like to discuss
Papa
liquor
McKee's
license.
is the,
we could use it.
Well,
Thank you,
for
Gary, in
following up.
advance. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I came to this meeting tonight.
But I don't think people at the bar are gonna approve a bike pass, so I don't think that's your crowd.
I'm just thinking outside the box, okay?
Can we get anybody from Riverview Commons? I mean, that's one of the paths, like, yeah.
You were correct.
You would think
Ideal,
so.
it would seem to me.
Reach out.
Yeah, the one person I did talk to did have a connection with us. So, we'll see.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
So next is consideration of approval of liquor licenses.
For
There's
the
a
Lucky
list
Spot
of-
and
Oh, I didn't
for,
put it in the package.
Can we just jump in?
Yes.
This is
344.
Bard. I move to approve 1st and 3rd class liquor licenses for Vermont Fine doing business as Kitchen Table.
second,
Thank you, Bard. Motion made by Bard, seconded by Jay Fur. Calling the motion to a vote. Please
Jay, aye.
identify yourself and
Lisa, aye.
signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Bard, aye.
David, I.
David, I would like to move to approve 2nd class liquor licenses for William Donovan doing business at Lucky Spot Variety.
second,
Thank you. Motion made by Bard, seconded by Jay. Calling the motion to a vote. Please signify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay, I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
Bard, aye.
David, I. Josh, just a nitpick. Shouldn't that be doing business as? not
Yeah,
at?
it was a
Oh,
long,
sorry,
it was a
yes.
long day on Friday.
Yeah.
Really? And
But I do-
Saturday
but
and
I do
Sunday.
have typos pretty much
Monday.
regularly in the memo, so I will say it wasn't all the flood. It
See if he's
probably would have been there anyway, guys.
So next is consideration of accepting a grant to fund municipal roads stormwater improvements. How pertinent. So this is a $200,000 grant from the state of Vermont. that-
20,000,
What did I say?
200,000.
Oh, I
Grant
am
maybe.
dyslexic. So this is a
The grant aid is 20.
$20,000 grant from the state of Vermont that would be used for stormwater improvements on roads. This funding is designed to aid in the town's compliance with the Municipal Roads General Permit, MRPG, which sets standards for stormwater management on hydrologically connected roads. There is a match of $5,000, which will come from a combination of stormwater budget line and from wages off highway staff assigned to work on this project.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the $20,000 grant from the Grant and Aid Program.
Is Bard, I will second that.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Bard. Calling the motion to a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay, I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
Bard, aye.
David, I.
David, was that any special road or is it for all the town highways?
So it,
Specific to a project or?
So it's part of the municipal road general permit for upgrading stormwater treatment. So it can be applied to any hydraulically connected road that is substandard. And so Pete works with Chris Dubin at CRPC. We have a whole map.
That's good. I just.
Pete's got a plan.
Big picture.
It'll work.
It's big picture money. That's what.
Yeah, it's not specific. And we get it every year because it's the state's way of helping out with a somewhat unfunded mandate.
Thank you.
So next is consideration of accepting a Class 2 roadway grant for paving.
Seems like.
So this one is tied to a specific road, and this is Huntington Road.
And this is a $200,000 grant.
Yes, 200,000.
Gonna take that much
So
paving.
that allows us to expand, kind of complete Huntington Road. I think Pete paved it partway to the town line, and now this will allow us to pave it all the way. But we have some other things to get through first. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, the matter of the Class 2 roadway grant for paving, I move the town accept that.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have a second?
Is Bart, I second that.
Thank you, Bard. So motion made by Lisa Miller, seconded by Bard Hill, is to move to accept the $200,000 Class 2 roadway grant. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
J.I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
And David, I. Next is consideration of approval of an agreement with East Engineering for engineering services to repair Dugway Road from the July 2023 flooding.
So if you want a little more, there's a sort of a erosion from the Huntington River next to Dugway Road. It's going to require a significant amount of stone to build that back up. It's not going to be the wall like we built at Huntington Gorge a couple of years ago, but it does need some engineering. And FEMA's approved that we can move forward with East Engineering as we have the RFQ process in place. Tyler's already looked at the site. I think he's got a pretty good plan. He actually designed the wall down the road at Huntington Gorge, so he's very well qualified for this. And as soon as we hire him, we can get the process moving, and then when we have a final design, we can move towards construction. It'll probably be funded partially through public assistance, but there might also be some mitigation money that comes from FEMA on this, and the mitigation would be if we build it back better than it was, which I think we'll kind of have to, because the stone that was in that area was just sort of smaller. So we'll build it back better to be a little bit more sustainable.
This is last week's flooding?
No, this is
This was
last year's flooding.
2023, okay.
Yeah,
Curiosity, Josh, I drive down Dugway almost daily
Yeah.
sometimes, and I'm not familiar with where this specific damage is.
Yep.
Yeah.
so it's down near the intersection, the Huntington Road end, more by the Christmas tree farm area.
Gotcha.
I think there's still a couple of cones sort of off to the side there.
Mr. Chairman, I move to enter into an agreement with East Engineering for engineering services for the repair of damages to Dugway Road caused by the July 2023 flooding at an amount not to exceed $35,000, with consideration that this cost may increase for work related to right-of-way easement and FEMA assistance. That cost increases related to right-of-way easement and FEMA assistance will be billed at an hourly rate of $125 per hour as needed.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
J.I.
Lisa, I.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
And David, I. Next is the Richmond Rescue fiscal year 24 fourth quarter update. Anybody have any questions on that?
As always, much praise to Richmond Rescue for the stellar job that they do.
Yeah.
We're lucky they're there.
We are very lucky that there, when you consider that, I will, Vermont League of Cities and Towns has a number of committees that meet to discuss legislative lobbying priorities for the coming year. And I was at the meeting of the Public Safety Committee last week in Montpelier, and that committee covers police, rescue, and fire. And there were a number of people there from towns around the state. And I was just struck by our agency is not, it's an independent agency, and we get much better service than towns that pay for their rescue service. And it just really jumps out at you how unusual the situation we've got is compared to other towns around the state.
Really true.
Can I just say, Jay, thank you for attending that on our behalf, and thank you to Richmond Rescue. You're wonderful people. You really care about our communities and the community around us. So I just want to thank you for your services. And Jay, thank you for going to that and representing.
And I'm just gonna throw in one very tangentially related thing that I brought up at the meeting, the subject of something that New York State does, of giving towns the option of giving a 10% tax break to people who serve a number of hours responding to fires. And when I said that, everybody around the room looked up and went, I mean, we don't have that? I'm like, no, we don't have that. And we're like, well, for God's sakes, that should be number one. So I'm hoping that that gets followed up on. VLCT will typically write a draft bill, find some sponsors to introduce it, and then try to push it through. So that I think would be, I mean, we have, as you know, Adam, we have people who are on the fire department, but they work in Burlington. They're not necessarily there for calls. So this would not be contingent on just being a member, but you would have to actually respond.
Yeah.
Be triggered by like a certain percentage of
Something like-
response time,
Yeah,
responses within a year.
right. But I mean, it's a big priority for a lot of towns to get.
I mean.
Incentives.
I don't know the details. I can say more broadly speaking, anything we can do to get volunteers.
Yeah.
Would be
Exactly.
welcome, because
Yes.
we've had, I think, 3 new volunteers in the last year, and that has been a real game changer for us, and we could use 3 to 20 more.
Yeah.
And maybe it's gonna scale, having this is the max and you can be somewhere on that scale and that promotes more volunteer, more responses.
Yeah, I'm gonna be following up and keeping an eye on that with VLCT because I don't want this to get dropped. Every town in the state, with the exception of the gold towns, has this same issue.
I think we're actually, honestly, we're not in a great spot.
No.
We're
No, we haven't
far,
been for a
far
while.
from in the worst spot. So this is
Wow.
something that we can.
Wow.
Yeah, we can, it would help Richmond immensely, but this is something that we have the leeway to push, and if you push that, that would really.
Great idea.
Be a boon for the towns. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 1st meeting?
This is Adam. I make a motion, we approve the minutes of the 7-1 meeting as recorded.
This Bart, I'll second that.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Bard. And can I just say, what I give to go back in time to January or July 1st. It was a simpler time. Okay, it's calling the motion to a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
This is J.I.
Lisa, aye.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I. Purchase orders.
So I just looked at that. That was a water wastewater
Yeah.
one that accidentally got put in.
I just looked
packet.
at it.
So, I'll bring that to water wastewater in 3 weeks. So you
Okay.
have no purchase orders tonight.
And warrants.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the warrants as presented.
Thank you,
I'll
Jay.
second that.
Thank you, Lisa.
Mhm.
Any comments? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
And David, I. So now that it's 9:20 or 9:10, items for next agenda, obviously follow up on storm damage and potential planning for future storms.
Microphones.
I already got it noted.
There was much complaining recently in Front Porch Forum about parking not being enforced on Dugway Road and that rescue vehicles could not have gotten through.
Oh, wow.
And that's a huge concern. I mean, that's why we amended the parking ordinance to provide that to basically make there be a lot more enforcement of parking, and apparently it's not working out that way.
I know they have written some tickets up there. Cause I followed up with the chief on it. I actually have.
I think they towed enough cars to get the message out.
Yeah, and I've got an appeal already that came in from towing,
Really?
which they all come in eventually, so. And I think the recent flooding, as last year, will put a damper on demand for swimming for at least a little while, because
Hopefully.
the river remained high for a while. We didn't have any parking
I hope
issues.
people won't swim in it.
But we'll see how quickly the water comes down this year. Last year was a particularly wet summer, even after the flooding. So we'll see, but no, Chief Cambridge is well aware that that's a high priority over the summer.
Yeah, Andy was up there writing
Yeah,
tickets.
he
right?
wrote
can
some
do
tickets
that?
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's-
he's
we-
been,
we should
he's been involved, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
what are you getting for appeals?
Oh, so if somebody appeals their parking ticket or
Yep.
their towing, they will write to me and say, because that's the process. Here's where I was parked. I think I was parked legally, or there was no sign. And then I go through the process of reaching out to the officer to figure out, okay, what were they seeing, where were they parked? And then having a response, either upholding the ticket or granting the appeal.
Do we need to improve signage?
We just did improve signage, actually. Last year, the signage we had, so we had that new 2 mile stretch on the right-hand side, I think it's 2 miles. We assigned at the beginning, assigned in the middle, assigned at the end. It really wasn't super adequate. This year, I don't know how many signs Pete put in, but there are multiple signs along that line. And this appeal, I haven't even looked at it yet to see
Sure.
where they were parked. But that was one thing that came out when I got a lot of appeals last year. I said, we need to do some more signage here.
Yes.
They were angled oddly too. This year they've greatly improved, is my understanding.
Thank you.
So, yep.
I didn't
And-
know that you handled traffic court too.
Oh, I actually had to go to traffic court a couple of years ago because somebody like appealed my decision and that ends up going to traffic court. So I sat on a Zoom call for like 2 hours waiting for our docket number to come up, and then it was quite the experience.
I'm struck for our next agenda that, the folks from O'Neill Drive, Red Barn, et cetera, may want more time. I mean, we might want to structure that a little bit about
Yeah.
what direction is going to be helpful.
I mean, I don't know. I think you guys did a really nice job today of outlining what we can and can't do. So I don't know if there's much action items that we can actually take next time. but
We can, on our own, push their GoFundMe.
Yeah.
Since I shared the link on Facebook tonight, we got like $800 already.
Okay.
so-
It's gotta, like, I don't know, I feel for them, and there's 10 of them, and it's gonna be $20,000, and that's $2,000 a pop.
Yeah.
And then up Snipe Island, we have a friend who has to rebuild a bridge. He's in the same boat as them with his lineman's truck stuck across the bridge, can't even work because his line truck's there. And it's gonna cost him 40 grand, and he's not coming here and asking us for stuff, so like, I feel for him, but like, they kind of got to suck it up and build the bridge themselves.
And
that's kind of-
there are multiple private drives and private roads right
They-
now.
they are in a
that-
good
I
spot
mean,
to go
Jay
along.
lives on one, Beesaw, or not Beesaw Road, Bates Farm Road has significant damage. There are a lot.
Driveways themselves.
Private driveways or private roads, yeah.
That's one
No, I
resident.
think we should stay here longer. Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
I didn't want
I-
to whine to
I think
people
you-
about living on a hill.
I just moved we adjourn,
600
but
feet
God's
above
sake,
town,
somebody
getting
second
flood
it.
damage.
I think
Second.
your
I wouldn't believe it.
agenda item though, just be key with next time, because I think if you would communicate with them beforehand, they might not want to come back in front of you, because if you cannot take action on something,
I do.
I wouldn't want to come and sit in front of you if you're gonna just tell me we can't take action.
Because you did that already.
There were a couple of things though, like that were
Recommendations.
further out, like examine
Oh,
all
no.
of the
It's calling motion
the
to a
brook,
vote.
like, and there are a lot
Aye.
of brooks.
Lisa, aye.
Adam, I.
Pardon.
David, I, we are adjourned.